there used to be a policy that if you're going to respond to an active shooter, you must wait for at least one other person to go. And they're like, well, what happens if you go to this and you're there and your backup's like a minute out and you can hear people, being killed? I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to go in. I can't just stand there. It's like, I don't think I could live with myself and just being like, either a coward or pausing, And they're like, yeah, well, the policy says. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll get fired.
Today we have on a good friend of ours, Steve Winenger. Steve started a small rifle manufacturing company a few years ago called Ripcord Industries, and they have really made a name for themselves over the past few years producing high-end rifle components. But before we get into his small business, how it grew so quickly, and what it takes to build high-end rifle parts, we get into who Steve is, his military and law enforcement experience, what it takes to join SWAT, and then ultimately why he left. Now, before we start, we also have to thank our sponsor, Patreon. Our Patreon members invest just a little bit of money, $5 a month, into keeping our content high quality and going every single day. A special thanks to them. Also a special thanks to Nick Jones. Specialist Nicholas Jones is giving of his time freely to make this content possible as well. Steve, thank you for being here, man. We appreciate your time.
I didn't know we were officially starting. I thought there was an intro.
No, there was. It just happened.
I got you.
Yeah,
Okay,
so it already happened. They already heard it. But again, thank you for being here.
Well, I appreciate you guys thinking of me and inviting me over to be a part of this.
Absolutely,
man. Well, I know so many of your dirty stories, so I can't wait to get into them.
I am an open book for the most part.
Okay, good. Well, with that in mind, let's start with a quick speed round. Just no specific topics on these. They're a little bit sporadic. So, first of all,
is this like the tactical version of Hot or Not?
Oh, we need to do that.
Oh,
Hot or Not. Like the old website?
Yeah.
Like where you go and rape people?
Yeah. Okay, so here we go. Law folders, Hot or Not?
It depends.
No. Hot or Not. It's you have.
I'm sorry, that's your line.
That's right. You have 1 second to answer. It's just gut reaction.
Okay. You gotta ask the question again.
Law folders.
Hot.
Muzzle brakes.
Not.
380 ACP.
Pass.
Ooh.
You didn't say I couldn't pass.
That's true.
Oh, that's fair.
This is turning into Truth or Dare.
Mil-spec triggers.
Hot.
Okay.
Fixed front sight posts.
Hot.
Grand thumb.
Muy fuego.
Oh,
is that right? Is that
Charlie and Micah.
Who? Oh! Look, I don't know some of the back end stuff. If you're talking about Micah,
goodness.
right?
Yes,
that's
Micah.
the one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've never met the guy or talked to him, so I would imagine he's a good dude because you guys have, I think, spoke about him, or Chad has.
He's super hot.
So, awesome, yeah.
Yeah, Charlie, he's the one with the weird glasses.
And the rake.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I didn't know.
So Hot or Not?
I feel bad. Sure, hot. We'll give him a hot.
I'm not too sure about that one.
Easy way out of that.
We know how you stand now. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That was a good little...
That was fun. Yeah. Okay, should we roll into the questions that I had previously selected?
Probably.
Okay, what is something in your EDC that may surprise others? And if you don't have anything, that's fine too, but is there something that you carry every day that's like, yeah, man, I carry a pencil, or I carry a ruler because I'm measuring stuff all the time? I don't know.
4 packs of cigarettes.
I was going to just say pocket sand and leave it at that, but that's like a funny haha. I don't really actually put sand in my pockets. I don't know. For my EDC, it's mainly just my handgun. I've got a knife. I don't really carry a whole lot of extra stuff on me, like pocket-wise. I don't like having all this stuff on me to keep track of. And if some people like medical kits or whatever, I carry a full entire medic bag that's in the truck, especially for our outdoor stuff. And then I have a small personal one that's on the passenger seat right next to me, but I don't necessarily carry that stuff with me.
Sure.
If I go into the store or that type of thing.
In your medical bag, do you know how to use everything in it?
I know how to use a good majority of it. Yeah. And what's nice is that if I have questions or need refreshers, I can hit a buddy up and he can give me those little refreshing lessons here and there. So,
did you get some of your medical training when you were in the military?
Some, but it's not for the like unless you go into a specific field where like you're going to be a medic or you're going to be like, you know, where they farm surgeons or whatever. It's basically, you know, stopping bleeds, being able to help the medic if he needs assistance. So you have like combat lifesaver or CLS type stuff. Yeah. I could give IVs, you know, that type of thing, do the tourniquets, you know, help with like, you know, wound packing or stuff like that. Yep. Not anything that is like super ninja-like in the medical field.
Sure.
Nothing like that.
That makes sense.
I came up on this terrible wreck one time coming back from Colorado. I said I came up on it. It happened right in front of me. Car goes on its side, goes over into the median, pops back up over. I hop out of my car. The semi in front of me pulled over. We both hopped out. I was the first one to the door, opened up the door, and the lady didn't have any cuts on her at all. I had like my tourniquet and everything ready, but her head was swelling up. Yeah. Like by the second, you could see it like boop, 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 boop. And that was probably a terrible sound effect to get to such a tragic accident. But someone pulled over and he was like a surgeon. And he was like, does anyone have an IV or a bag or anything like that? And I was like, no, I don't. I don't have that. But anyways.
Yeah.
I'd say generally in those cases, the best thing for certain injuries like that, all you really can do is be there. And, you know, instead of being like, call 911 or someone do this, like if you can get on the phone and give brief and accurate information so that the dispatchers can get your medical personnel rolling that much sooner. Yeah. That, you know, that goes a long way in a lot of cases too. So like in law enforcement coming up on some of these wrecks sometimes, like all I could do is be like, I'll hold your hand till, you know, because I can't get them out of a thing or, you know, that type of stuff.
Yeah, just calm the patient as best as you can.
Exactly. And, giving information to dispatch, staying with the person, keeping them, you know, awake, that type of thing.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm sure we'll get back to some more of these interesting topics, but what's your least favorite part of building an AR? Do you have anything that stands out that's like, man, that stupid roll pin, I hate that part. Is there anything that...
It honestly used to be your like pivot pin and your takedown pins on your lowers, but having some of the tools that I use now where they're like specialty tools specifically for some of this stuff, excuse me, the thing that I have the least amount of fun with is doing muzzle device installs. Honestly, just because it's like if you're gonna run a suppressor, Surefire is good about the shim kit coming with the device because it's important to have shims, you know, if you're gonna mount a suppressor, making sure everything's like level and concentric, right? But they also have a timing wheel in their instruction chart, so it gets you close. Like you know kind of what combo to use for your shim kit, and it gets you fairly close, so it's fairly simple to do. But when you get like Knights or some of these other ones where you have to add the shim kit or whatever, it just turns into a big guessing game. And you're just putting the muzzle device on, you're taking it off, you're putting it on, you're trying different shims, you're close, then you're not close, and you're just like... That's probably my least favorite part is that just specific thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you remember whenever we were trying to install that Griffin can? And we're absolute idiots about it. So with the Griffin SD30K or whatever.
It mimics
that's
like
the
an
one
NT4.
that has the gate, right?
It's like an NT4, exactly.
Yeah, well, we didn't know it was a side gate. We thought it was like an NT4 or something where
Drops
it's like a
from the
top gate. So we were just sitting there jamming on it, couldn't get it to work. We're like, do we need to turn the muzzle device to be sideways? And everything. So finally I emailed their customer support and I was like, what the heck, man? Like, what's going on with this?
They got back in like 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes, and they're like, it goes in from the side. And we're just like, oh, okay.
We know.
Thanks,
yeah, they're just making sure you guys were on top of it.
Right,
yes,
yeah.
They were very respectful. Yeah. They didn't make us feel like idiots, thank goodness.
Exactly.
That was probably those little moments in life where you're doing something and you're doing like the monkey with the stick just smacking the thing, you know, whatever,
Hoping it
they're
works
like
this
confused,
time.
you know? And then all of a sudden when someone's like, hey, do this, and you're just like, it was staring me in the face the whole time.
Yeah.
I hate that. I hate that.
Yes.
This next question, I feel like needs to be a question that we ask everybody. What's the most danger you have been in on a flat range?
Well,
That you can say.
Yeah, that's
I can be vague about.
specifics.
Yeah, I don't have to talk about the people involved.
Okay.
One.
It's like this one time I was out shooting with Drew, and
I was on a range, and there was another guy putting on some instruction, and we had a lot of space, all the space in the world, right? We're going to run kind of 2 different drills, and I was going to oversee one. This dude was kind of overseeing the other, and he set the drills up very, very close to each other. But one of the firing lines was in front of kind of like where other people were going to be shooting this other drill, so it wasn't like the safest thing in the world. So we're like, hey, can we just like spread these out a little bit?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, good idea. So they spread them out a little bit. At least no one was going to be shooting past like the other group while they're doing this. And this group's over there just plinking away on the steel, and then it's like bang, ting, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh! And I got smacked in the gut. And it was enough to where I turned around, walked away from the line, like doubled over, thinking, I think I just took like a decent ricochet where it's probably stuck like in me or whatever. And I like lifted my shirt up and there's this massive bruise. Well, it didn't like go in or anything, but I took a pretty hefty smack to the gut.
Yikes,
Wait,
dude.
okay, so did it like deflect off of a rock or a burn?
I don't know. I just heard a
wasn't
shot.
spall.
I heard no, it was not a spall. this thing
shot.
had some oomph to it.
Oh, dude.
What if you actually did get shot, but your abs were just so taut?
Like just
Possible.
of like Man of Steel style.
you were
six
so
pack.
clenched, just being in that situation and
I don't like
nervous
that word.
that it just
That wasn't. I don't think that was the case at the time. I just remember being like my eyeballs watering and being like, can we just like, this is ridiculous.
I can just see you walking off the line, just starting to rip on a cigarette immediately afterwards.
I'm pretty sure I had one afterwards.
Of course.
So yeah, but I mean, that happens on the range sometimes, like where you'll get guns pointed at you inadvertently. I had a guy one time, he'd been kind of struggling throughout the day a little bit, but he'd been like getting it and asking a lot of questions and getting after it. And he finished this run and like he knew it was like it felt good, looked good. He immediately like turns around, big smile on his face, and I'm like, hey. So I was like, calm down.
Yeah, I got a little excited that day.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that does happen sometimes.
It does happen, yeah. Okay, last one on the speed round. If Rise of the Planet of the Apes happened and you were fighting against the apes, what gun would you want?
Well,
I would want a Ripcord 14.5. Sorry,
and see, honestly, that would have been an easy plug, but if you think about it, I'm probably going to want my handgun to be like 10 mil, right? I'm probably going to have like a 10 mil Glock.
Right?
Yeah.
Because like, like you go out camping or whatever and you got bears or these big animals, like your rifles are everyday type guns that we use are generally not what you want to carry for those types of environments. So I figure like a 10 mil Glock and like a Scar Heavy.
Okay.
Like some big rounds.
Yeah. Yep.
Because gorillas and the apes were all like strong and they're like all just muscle and
Ape shall
chiseled.
not kill ape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that, and they're just beating people with those massive paws.
Dude, the best ones were the old ones with Charlton Heston in the first couple of
With
them.
the like masks were just horrible.
Dr. Zaius. And,
I've never even seen those ones. I've only seen
Oh,
Dude, they're
those
so
were the
good. The
best.
second one, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, not good. Super weird. But the rest of them were amazing. They actually go back in time to modern day. So the apes that have evolved, they end up recreating the technology for time travel essentially, and they go back in time to like 1970s America, and they're basically, it's like aliens, we need to kill them. It's really good.
So from here on out, with every podcast that we do, I'm going to do my best to pick a movie, just bring a topic up randomly throughout the podcast with a movie, and he's going to have something to say about it.
Oh, yeah.
You always have
Oh, you know what? This would be the perfect opportunity to do it because I love pulling out, what's it called? Pop culture references.
Yeah.
Like from music, commercials, cartoons, movies. We could play that game.
Yeah.
Well, so there was this line in one of the, I think it was the fourth of the 5 old Planet of the Apes movies. To our podcast listeners, I promise we'll move on to gun stuff, but this is important. Okay. There's this line when the main character who was an ape in the fourth movie, his son goes up to him and he's like, "Father, shall I be malformed?" Because he was afraid that like he wasn't going to get big and strong like his dad. He was like, "Father, shall I be malformed?" And that was like my line with my dad for like years. Even to this day, every now and then that I see him, I'm just like, "Father, will I be malformed?"
Did you ever get as big as your dad?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Actually, no, because he did like bodybuilding and stuff. And,
Oh, wow. Good for him.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway.
We haven't even talked about you yet. That's kind of fun, though.
That's all right. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Thanks for prompting me to tell my story, Steve.
Steve, would you sit down? Drew and I are going to have a conversation.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
I'm just, honestly, could I get a top off?
Yeah, give him some more
Can I
coffee.
get some more that all natural cow juice?
Oh, yeah. Here. Okay, now, wait for the ham.
Okay, you guys keep doing what you're doing.
To our listeners right now, what we're doing is we are filling Steve up with coffee, and we're topping him off with some authentic raw cow milk, actually the cream from it, which you have to let sit for 6 hours undisturbed to allow the cream to rise to the top.
Do you want to rub the spoon on the thing for some ASMR?
Oh, yeah, here.
Get real
Zoom,
quiet.
zoom,
I
zoom,
don't know
zoom.
if we can get that.
Pull it up next to your mic there.
There we go.
Good,
All right,
yeah.
That's really going to tickle some people's ears.
Yep. Some people sitting in a car are like, oh, cut that out right now. Okay. Steve, we'll get away from...
This is why our podcast is better than everyone else's.
That's true.
I like this. You know why? Because I feel a lot more relaxed. I know as we were getting closer,
Good.
you can probably tell the body language is getting like, oh man, I'm going to say a lot of ums and this.
You look clenched.
Yeah, I did. But I'm feeling a little bit more like, chill.
Yeah, good.
Wait, dude, the
That's
title
the way
of
we like you.
the title of the podcast will not be this, but I wish it was Clenched with Steve Winenger.
Oh, that's what it's going to be.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
that's what it's going to be.
And you have to listen to understand.
That is what it's going to be.
In the first, we're like 10 minutes in and we've said clenched 3 times.
Solid clickbait right there.
Okay. Steve, dude, where'd you grow up?
Oh man. That's a tough question, buddy. No, I'm just kidding.
Did you move a lot?
Oh, man, that's a tough
That's
question.
a tough question there. I grew up in northern Indiana, a town called South Bend. It's where Notre Dame is. He's excited about that, I think.
Is that where Nick
Nick
is? That
Jones
where
is.
That's where their whole family's from. That's where Aubrey's from.
Oh,
He's also kind of
So
got
you're not
some
from there.
leprechaun thing
Oh,
going
you're
on, so
I
he's
got
probably
you.
a big fan.
Well, yeah,
of
I can see that.
Red
He's
hair
too tall,
and-
though.
That's true.
He'd never make it as the mascot there.
True. Yeah.
They always used like short dudes.
Is that what they call them?
Well, no, not actual like little people, just shorter people, like shorter.
We're gonna have to edit some of this out. Oh my god.
Guzman's going to be punching the air right now while he's listening to it.
Yeah, so I grew up in South Bend, Indiana. It's northernmost part of Indiana, just below Michigan. Right there by Lake Michigan, and we're unfortunately close to Gary and all that.
Yeah.
But
But
that's
your
where I
water
grew up.
supply remains untainted, correct?
I don't know. I saw the photo they posted from space where they could see the big mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
So I asked my dad. I was like, you guys are right there near Ohio by a couple hours. I was like, have you guys seen anything or noticed anything? Because he's like, no, haven't seen anything or noticed anything.
Was he like, no, but I got this growth on my tongue now.
You're actually talking to the growth. Your dad's asleep right now.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Wasn't there birds in Kentucky dropping out of the sky from that?
Probably.
Yeah.
There's also just a lot of hunters.
That is true.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
true.
Of all the states we could have picked,
Yeah,
Kentucky's
they
the
just
one
got
that's
their
like.
thumb and a shotgun trigger just pop in the sky
Yeah.
pretty much constantly.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so you grew up there.
Yeah.
You're here now. What did you join the military straight away, and then that's how you got somewhere else, or did you move while you were growing up? I mean, were you just growing up there the whole time?
We only moved once. So I had a pretty, I think, probably mundane, just regular run-of-the-mill childhood, pretty traditional family.
yeah, tell us about young Steve.
Young Steve.
Yeah.
Do you want me to
your-
do the thing and then the thing?
like your
or-
preteen years, like young Steve.
Okay. We grew up first living in an apartment above a place called Ray's TV that doesn't exist anymore.
Wait, that's a town?
No, the South Bend is the town.
What's raised TV?
Ray's TV, like Ray, like
Ray's.
like a Ghostbuster. Ray.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right? They had this apartment. We lived there for years, like when I was in preschool, kindergarten, and I think maybe it was in first grade or whatever. We moved literally across the highway into the neighborhood where my parents' house is now. And that's where I grew up. Like all the neighborhood kids, like we get on the bikes, you know, all summer be outdoors, gone, you know, all over the place. You know, school was walking distance, so I walked to and from school. There was a hill that I had to walk up.
Of course, both ways.
And yeah, played baseball, that type of thing.
Nice.
I was a very particular child, very stubborn. My mom, probably, like, God bless her, I probably am to blame for a lot of her gray hair.
Yeah. Yeah, kids will do that.
Yeah, I was very, like, strong-willed. Like, you know what I'm saying? We're just, like, a stubborn kid. Like, if I wanted to do something, I'd really, like, make sure to try and, like, I'd want to, like, I don't know. I was a very stubborn kid.
Yeah.
Did you get in trouble at all?
For a while, I was pretty good. Like, always got good grades and all that kind of stuff.
When he answers the question, was he a bad
For a
kid?
while.
For a while, I was good.
It's like answering Santa Claus. Were you good this year?
It's the same answer Jeffrey Dahmer would have. For a while, I was good. No.
Is that a line from that movie?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, man, I hope
It just
not.
sounds like something a serial killer would say. But I know you're not one. At least I don't think you are.
At least you don't think I am.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just regular old stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the closer I got to high school, the more I would be at odds with mostly my dad, because he'd be like, you need to get your grades, you need to set yourself up for the future, this kind of thing. And I'm like, nah, I'm living for the now. Yeah. You know, don't tell me what to do.
Of course.
That type of thing.
Yep.
What were you into in high school?
I played baseball. That was kind of my big thing. And then I worked at one of my buddies' family's Dairy Queens. I started there like right after 8th grade, and I worked there up until I went to the military.
Nice.
I was like, I was the guy that cut the grass and took care of the building, to a manager when I left.
Good for you.
I was a manager of the Dairy Queen.
Moving up in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
If you would have just stuck with that, Steve.
Look,
I could be a francier.
Yeah, we'll say Franchier.
Franchier.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know it's something fancy sounding like that.
Franchier sounds pretty clinched, if you ask me.
It's probably not the right word, but whatever. We're
Yeah.
gonna roll with it.
we're in it now.
So you went straight from DQ to ARMY.
To
What?
Army? Did I spell that wrong?
I had no idea what. I was
spelled
like,
it right.
it's
I
an
was like,
acronym for.
Nick, I spelled that right, right?
Yeah, ARMY.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
Yep. No,
Arnie.
Arnie Balmy.
Steve joins the Army.
Yeah, from Dairy Queen to boot camp, basic training.
Why?
I wanted to join when I was 17, but Bill Clinton was the president at the time. My dad was like, I am not signing this permission slip while that man is in office. He goes, you turn 18, and if he's still in office, you know, you're an adult, and I'll support your decision, but I'm not going to do it now.
Did you say it in like the Bill Clinton like accent? Like,
No, he
you
was...
will not join the military with that when that man is in office.
That was good.
That was pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
The pauses and the inflection was pretty good.
Cool.
No, he was pretty adamant that that I not do that because he's not a fan of like the UN stuff, you know, and they were getting involved with a lot of that at the time. And then I graduate high school, 9/11 happens, and I was like, well, it's now or never. I was like, you know, because my grandfather was a combat engineer in the Army in World War II. And so I always was like, since I was a little kid, I was like, I'm going to be in the Army and I'm going to be a cop and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So, like, I knew, I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, now is probably the time to do it.
So 9/11 happened right after you graduated?
Yeah, it was that summer or like toward the end of that summer, I would say. I don't know when school starts back up. It's been a few years, but.
Sure.
Yeah, I actually, was getting ready to go meet a buddy for whatever. I think we're going out on the motorcycles or something. And the lady that cut my hair at the time had called, so I'd answer the phone. She's like, are you watching the television? I was like, no. She goes, turn the TV on. I was like, what channel? She goes, it doesn't matter. And she hangs up the phone. So I turned the TV on.
Wait, did you have an appointment with her,
Yeah,
or
why'd
did
she
she
call
just randomly
you?
call you?
Well, they were like friends of like the family. So like in,
Oh, okay.
in our like neighborhood area, you had like the middle school, the high school, you know, all the families on like
so
our
she was
street.
just letting everyone know.
Yeah, she had just was calling people.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So like her kids were friends with like my siblings and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, that
so.
makes more sense.
Yeah, I turned the TV on and the first plane had already hit, And then while we're watching it, then the second plane hits, and I was like, well, now's the time. So I like went down to the recruiter's office, and my buddy's like, yeah, I'm gonna do it with you. And I think he was kind of just like,
he was fired up too,
but not like really. You could tell like, that look when someone's like, yeah, this looks like fun. And then he never signed up. He's like, oh man, I got this condition. I don't remember exactly what it is, and that's fine. Like if he wasn't, I probably got him jazzed up because I knew I was going to do it.
Sure.
I was like, regardless, I was like, I'm going to go do this. And so I did. That's checking one of those boxes, since I was a little kid saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So boot camp, what MOS did you get
So
stuck
originally, since I was like, well, I want to be a cop, I was like, I'll go be an MP.
with? Sure.
Yeah.
And then when I get out of the military, I'm
have
going to be like a
experience.
for sure hire. They're going to be like, oh, MP, police in the army, police on the streets. It's the same, right?
Yeah.
And the recruiter was like, what type of language is allowed on this podcast?
Anything you want.
Yeah, dude.
Is that okay?
Yeah, we just had Derek
I'll try
Palmer
not
on.
to.
Yeah, we just had Derek on.
Okay, well, I haven't listened to that one yet. And that's one of the, so.
Me and Josh try and keep ourselves G-rated, but you can go full bore, man.
All right. Well, I won't do it for like shock value, but some of the stuff is probably, it's better for the story if I just talk like the recruiter.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
it's like, why the fuck would you do something in the military that you could do in the civilian world? And I was like, that's not a bad point. He's like, besides, everyone fucking hates MPs. And I was like, well, I don't want everybody to hate
do
me.
that.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, what do you have in mind? And he goes, almost like out of a cringy movie. He had the VHS tape too. This dude.
Turn around and push it into the VCR.
Oh,
It was already loaded.
He literally is like, oh, well. And
He had been waiting all day for that. You just made his day.
he's like, what do you know about the infantry? And I was like, I don't know what that means. He's like,
Then you'll be perfect.
he's like, "Ka-chick," and he like presses the tape in. It was one of those TVs that had the VCR built into it.
Yeah.
Right?
Big
fancy.
square,
Yeah.
like 1.5 feet deep.
Well, no. It was like the little one. Like,
Oh.
It was like the little TV because it was in his office.
It wasn't
right?
ratchet strapped to the top
No,
of
no,
anything.
not that
He
one.
probably
Okay,
brought
not
it from
that one.
home. Let's be real.
So he's like, "Ka-chick," and he hits play, and it's like, like the beginning of
Yeah.
You've probably seen VHS tapes.
Oh,
and I would imagine
please.
you
I
have.
grew up watching John Wayne movies. And
Okay,
everything.
good. Yeah, so you know what
Carry on.
VHS is.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it starts like, oh, U.S. Army infantry, and it's just showing like all these dudes in their camo and all their cool, like, all the M16s at the time.
Yeah.
And then they show like tanks and all this other stuff that you don't really get to mess with. You can like interact with those things, but you're not a tanker, you're not this, you're like running around in the woods and you're learning how to like engage, or what was the term he used? Something about seek out, engage with, and destroy the enemy. And like he goes, for every one of you, there's like 10 or 12 other MOS soldiers that just to support you. Like we're the badasses of the military, and it's the infantry, and everyone wants to be you. And you see this blue cord and all this other stuff on his uniform. I was like, yeah. He's like, got me all jazzed up, and I was like, that's what I'm doing. I was like, fuck all this other shit.
Blue cord.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna go be infantry. I'm gonna be a bad motherfucker. and I mean, I was hooked. Like at that point, like I saw the silly video, and then I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, for basic, and it was.
Did you breeze through basic?
I wouldn't say I breezed through it, but at the same time, I think prior to going, some of the programs they had at the time where they would actually get dudes kind of like somewhat acclimated to that before they went. That probably helped quite a bit. I was also having one of those internal, what have I done? Like this is like serious, and I've never like had to be responsible like this before. Like what if I fail? All this like uncertainty, right? Because you always hear horror stories about like basic training and how like hardcore it is, and I'm like, well, I mean, I've been yelled at before, like, like my dad's yelled at me, teachers, coaches, like I've been yelled at, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
For me, I was very nervous about the physical aspect of it, just because I think at the time I was 120 pounds, like I was just a stick, and I'm like I can do all these push-ups. I can't run that far, but they get you to where you need to be.
Yeah.
You just got to know that it's not a game. Like they're trying to get you prepared for like adversity, like and living in less than ideal conditions because we're so pampered, you know. And that's all it is. It's not that like the drill sergeant is mean or this and that and the other. Like you should get yelled at. You should have like physical consequences to making mistakes because they're trying to get you to understand, you know, the environment that you may, you know, be operating or living in type deal, like what your job is, you know. So I was pretty nervous about the physical aspect of everything and like, what if I fail? I can't fail. Like this has got to be something I do. And I remember waking up. There's a couple times where you're just so tired. I think it was the first time I'd really been that tired in my life. You know, it feels like you like lay down, close your eyes, and then bam, on your feet. And you're like, I can't anymore. Like I just need a nap. You know, like, and just thinking I've made a horrible mistake. Like this is horrible. But then once you realize that, you know, after like the first time you get smoked, right, and you're just like, oh my God, if you can just be like mentally in it and just be like, I know I'm gonna have to suffer for a little bit. It's got to end sometime. Yeah. So just deal with it now, and then you won't be a shitbag later. So that type of thing.
Gotcha.
Did I answer the question?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So you got through basic, and did you get stationed anywhere?
So that's the other part of it, and there's gonna be people be like, oh, it was National Guard. So I was, you know, in the National Guard.
Sure.
We have Specialist Jones over here.
Yeah.
Specialist
Nicholas Jones.
Yeah.
So the unit that I was that I belonged to was originally the unit like in South Bend.
Sure.
They had an infantry unit there. My first deployment, however, there was another infantry unit that was lacking bodies, but they were the ones that had got, you know, that infantry battalion or brigade or whatever the hell was on the table to go to Iraq, and they were needing to pull from other infantry battalions personnel. So we got mixed in with, was it Charlie Company, I think at the time, out of Tell City. So one of the 152 or something like that, the 76th. And did my first deployment with them. And then coming back, I was on active orders for like recruit sustainment unit. So what we would do is we'd get all like the new soldiers that were coming in, either back from basic or going to, we'd work with them, we'd teach them, try to get them spun up on different stuff and get them sent off to their units, or if some of them would end up coming to ours. So that's what I did for a long time in the military, was work with like a lot of the new soldiers.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Coming in.
What was your first deployment like? It was Iraq or Afghanistan?
Iraq.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a couple things that stand out that have always stuck with me. Is the first time, if you've never been out of the country, you know, and you've seen stuff on like National Geographic, or you've seen a documentary about something. And I remember when watching the Gulf War on the news with my dad.
Yeah. I remember that too.
Yeah, and so like you see that stuff, and it's always like it makes it seem as though it's, you know, it's real and that it's a place on Earth and that those things are happening. But then when the plane touched down, when you land in Kuwait and you get off the plane for the first time and you experience that air, the like seeing that with your own eyes, or like then when you like touch down into wherever, you know, in Iraq, usually I think it was Al Assad at the time, was one of the places. It's just this very surreal. It's like you're watching the documentary, but you're in it.
Yeah,
and it was very. I don't know. It was just a weird experience. That always stuck out to me. That very first time that I like saw it, breathed that air, felt, you know, like that area. It was definitely like, I don't know. It was weird, different.
It's a whole new world.
Yeah, kind of. Especially, you know, that was my first time ever being that far from home, let alone like out of the country.
Yeah.
But other than that, like on my first deployment, we did site security for a little bit, and then the initial invasion happened. So if I remember right, I want to say it was like 3rd ID or whatever that prepped and took off and started their push into Iraq. And then what we were doing, we got assigned to run PSD for KBR, Halliburton, Boots and Coots. When the president, or one of the bigwigs, I think it was the president of Halliburton or whatever, came, we went out with his personal detail team, and we went out to these different sites that he wanted to check, in like Basra and Qasar, like over at a port. And we did like our site security type stuff where we go out ahead and check things and say, okay, we need to make sure this, and this when we bring this guy here, and did our like dry runs, and then we would do basically like the escort stuff for guys like
gotcha.
that. We would do like their protective details for guys that would go out and teach the Iraqis, get them tools to help like rebuild a lot of their infrastructure.
Gotcha.
One of the cool things though is that port was designed to export oil. And I think for the first time since it's like it, was a thing, they worked with a lot of the local, like the Iraqi engineers, and they reversed the flow of everything so they could bring oil in, and they pumped oil like to tankers, like all the semis would roll up, and they could pump it into like nearby towns so that people could have power and cook and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
So we did like the site security for a lot of that too, and it was the first time I ever saw an attack helicopter come flying and doing our, like Overwatch and everything. That was pretty cool.
What kind of, when you're doing PSD, personal security detail, when you're doing that kind of work, how much prep work are you guys doing before? I mean, are you guys doing the typical looking over maps and paying attention to, we have these alleyways and these LDAs and potential concern areas and pinch points and things? Are you guys, I just don't even know. Do you guys do a lot of, before you even step off and go out, are you guys doing a lot of prep work before you even head out? Or is it like, man, we don't know what we're getting into here?
No, you don't want to take someone who you think is going to be like, oh, could be a target of opportunity for somebody that wants to cause problems or what have you. So the team, and it wasn't always like the same team depending on what was going on. So like for the president of Halliburton, their security team told our unit, these are the guys we want for this. Because then the leadership at the time was like, oh, we'll do this because it's going to be like, they looked at it as like, oh, it's going to be a cush thing, right? And they were like, nah, we'll get someone else if you don't give us these guys. And that kind of made some people butt hurt. So depending on what's going on, you're going to have like the group of guys that are working together. Now, that may sound a little weird. I don't mean like we're just pulling random dudes that we've never worked with before. I'm just saying the makeup of the team. It may be like maybe we're 3-on-1, one time, but then let's say the next time it's like we aren't on it, but you two are type deal. So you're going to want to make sure you know what vehicles you're going to take. You're going to have like routes, alternate routes, contingency plans, know exactly like, okay, he wants to go look at this. Can we do that safely? If not, how do we appease that? Or be like, here's your alternative. You can't go do that because we don't like X, Y, or Z. And we did have, there was some like Iraqi forces, kind of like militia types that we'd have to keep an eye on at the time too, that they'd have like overnight guards and stuff. And sometimes it's like, why aren't these guys here? It's like, let's not go here, like that type of thing. So there's a lot of prep work and planning to where it's like, okay, if all goes well, this is how it should look. If it doesn't, here's our plan. If this route ends up being squirrely, or hey, we think, this route might be compromised, or we can't go here, we'll call it off or go a different way. And then once you get there, like there's the ADVON team to give you that information. Hey, yeah, you're still good to come. Then you get there, and then there's a whole process of getting this person out and going to different places with them. It's pretty involved. Yeah. So.
Was that your only deployment, or did you go on another one too?
There was another one in, I don't know. It was like 07 or 08 or 09, something like that. I think it was like we started to train up in 07, we're there in 08, and came back in 09.
Gotcha.
But, it was more than 2 weeks ago, so the exact time frame's a little fuzzy. Yeah, and it was Iraq both times. So, like, first time it was southern Iraq, so going back and forth between Iraq and Kuwait, and working in, like, Basra and then the oil fields and that kind of thing. My next deployment, we finished some climatization stuff in Kuwait, flew into Al Asad Air Base, and that's where we were stationed. So it was a Marine-ran U.S. Post at the time, and I think there was like the British dudes were there every once in a while in passing, but it was mainly Marines, and then there was some 10th Mountain, and then there was us. And then that one was more so taking personnel and things from point to point to point. So it was more like route planning, route security, and moving, personnel and various like equipment or food or explosives or what have you around that AO, or going to like pick something up and that type of thing.
Do you feel like you've taken some of those specific experiences and applied them to things in your life? Because you're doing a lot of overlanding and driving around to, granted, there's not a whole ton going on in the States as far as like, other than maybe having some conflict at a bar or at a restaurant or at a gas station if I'm in a new state while I'm traveling. Do you still feel like you've taken some of those things into personal life here at home later on in your life and maybe applied like route planning and concerns, and this could be a pinch point, and where am I going to get fuel? And I mean, do you feel like you've taken some of that stuff?
Yeah, some of that stuff sticks with you in the sense of where you find ways that you're like, you recognize instances in your home life or your day-to-day where you can, oh, well, this is applicable, I could do this. So to give you some examples of that is just like, going to and from work. In the area where we live in Tennessee, there's a lot of people, and the area is growing quite a bit. So traffic, depending on the time of day you're going, could dictate the route that I want to take to get to work, right? So go from home to shop. I'm not necessarily worried about someone like casing me and following me, so I don't need to take different routes to be like, oh, keep them on their toes. Like, nobody cares. Like, I'm not that important where people aren't like, oh, we got to get him on his way to work. Like,
well, after this podcast, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I've hit the big time now. This is pretty amazing.
Now you're going to be driving to work clenched. Yeah.
Uber, like you have to pry me off the seat.
I knew it was coming. I didn't.
When I get to work.
I knew it was coming and I didn't know how.
Yeah. I've just been sitting here this whole time trying to figure out where I was going to work that word in.
Drop that one in there.
So I didn't even hear anything you said.
Very smooth.
Yeah, thanks.
So we'll go wait. No, I'm just kidding. But understanding like, hey, I don't always have to be stuck on this route when I go to, to work or to the grocery store or whatever. Understanding the area that I live in and not just allowing the Apple Maps or whatever, Google Maps to like, that's not, I can navigate understanding cardinal direction, terrain features, that type of thing. So being aware of like finding new roads or, as they develop your town, like, okay, what pass-throughs are there? Like, do I have to stay on these main routes that I know are going to be uber clogged? Because then, like let's say society deteriorates and everyone that panics is going to do what they like have programmed themselves to do, and they're going to be on all the main roads fighting with each other. Yeah. When you can be like, I'm just going to go this way. Yeah. Like that type of thing. Yep. And, as a guy who owns and operates an FFL, there's times where there's natural disasters or the Antifa stuff out, west, where the ATF will actually say you need to make sure that you protect your inventory, like make sure that it doesn't get like out in the hands of, criminals or whatever they deem. Yeah. But like if you don't like nefarious things, and I want to preface that with, because I know it's a little bit of sidebar I'm going off.
That's fine, go for
it. Understanding like if I had to get to my shop because there was an actual threat of people that I don't want getting my stuff, obviously they're going to break in and like steal it or whatever. Yeah. I need to be able to go protect that stuff. But how do I get from one town, 30 minutes to this other town, and how do I get there efficiently if, let's say, I really don't want to be on the main roads type thing.
I've always found it interesting that the ATF sends out those, like, essentially BOLO alerts for any sort of, crisis. Protect your firearms. It's like, you guys don't do anything of value. How about you send some agents out and provide me some free security?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's all those tax stamps and all that other stuff like that?
Yeah.
Where's that money going?
You can approve some stamps while you're out here.
Like, I want my own personal bodyguard agent to come and watch the store when I go home at the end of the night.
Exactly.
They're supposed to work for us. They're government agents. Yeah.
But they can never answer a question when you're like, I don't know. Like, I've read the form 18 million times, and every time I read, it says something different.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're like, hey, what does this mean? They're like, I don't know.
Well, they
All right,
can't read
thanks.
either. That's the problem.
Yeah, I don't like, anyway, yeah, that's
What were we talking about?
routes, like how the.
No, I know. It's just
Okay.
we easily get down a rabbit
I know,
hole.
it is very
The
easy.
next thing you know, Drew's saying clenched, and I'll lose track of what it is we were talking about.
We're going to put a little ding mark on the video version of this. We thought we were going to be tallying up how many times he smoked a cigarette if we did this outside. But instead, we're going to be tallying up clinch.
I have a request.
Okay.
And people won't get it until they get to this point. Instead of the ding sound, can we have a sound every time?
So you do yours out to in, I go in to out.
Yeah, how did you do that?
You like drug it across.
Yeah, all these him and his baby face can do that. It just sounds like bristle pad over here. It's like, I have to go in to out.
Yeah, that's what I just was like, bam,
Yeah.
just pry it out.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's the sound that we're gonna have for our clenched tally count.
Yeah. So you went from, at what point in the Army were you like, I'm done?
Well,
Boot
Or,
camp?
sorry, at what point in the National Guard? Because I know it'll make people mad.
whatever.
Or whatever.
It's, yeah, so the military, the Guard, and I know there's guys that they're very like passionate about how they feel about the different whatever. All I know is that when I signed up, I didn't know the difference between the two, and I was ready to sign up, and that was the recruiter's office I went to, and bam, I'd sign the paperwork, right?
Yeah.
I tried my best not to, and I'll talk about this, because I got to work with some really like squared away dudes that like, they were there to do the job they were asked, that type of thing, very professional guys. I also worked with some dudes that were probably like should have been given some crayons and told to sit in the corner. So I get where the stigma like comes from.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the question now.
At what point did you decide?
That
you
was
were, like,
getting out.
You were like, my passion is somewhere
I've
else.
had enough.
So I think the last, maybe there was some overlap. So from 2007, I think is when I started law enforcement. And then got through FTO, right, and deployed, and then had to do a lot of that over again. I had earned a spot on our SWAT team in the county, and we didn't have a lot of dudes at the time. Like, we were shorthanded for what our capabilities were, what we were supposed to be responsible for. So anytime I had to be gone, it was important to me that it was worth, like, it had to be worth it to be gone from the teammates.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go to Pathfinder school, for one. And we were also being switched from a traditional infantry, and I can't remember brigade, battalion. I'm going to get live on this because I don't remember all the different, like levels, because I'm done with that part of my life, and it's like brain flush, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
At least like the non-important stuff. So I wanted to go to Pathfinder, and I did have like the opportunity to enlist for the third time. So I joined, re-enlisted, and then that time was coming to an end. And when we were switching over to a RISTA, Recon Surveillance Target Acquisition, it was working in smaller teams, doing more like recon type stuff. Helicopter drops you off here, you're gonna go sneak over here, set up your little hide site and hide your stuff, and then go out and observe and try to basically like fill in an overlay for hire so that they could build like, their battle space, get an idea of, acclimate them to what's going on so they can start planning things.
Gotcha.
And when we were making this switch and reorganizing, for a while we were actually getting to do some pretty, I would say, worthwhile training, like learning that job, learning a new skill or task. And it was going really great. And then apparently, I don't know if it's budget cuts or whatever, but then they started taking us to these training facilities that had amazing resources. But then you're taking a bunch of infantry guys, a mix of like brand new, like, 19 and 20-year-olds fresh out of basic. And then you got guys that have been deployed and kind of salty. Then you're putting them in a computer lab and essentially telling them to play Call of Duty on a computer and to take it seriously and act as if, you're doing this job. And what would end up happening, you guys could probably guess, is everyone was just like, hey, bam, respawn, like, and just being silly with it.
Yeah.
And then the guys getting all mad, and I'm like, what do you expect
Right.
It's like you're not like we're here to like learn and do some training. I was like, this is this is ridiculous. No one's going to get anything out of this.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like what games are now, where there's apparently very realistic and like the controls make sense type stuff games.
Yeah.
This was like this old school where your gun is floating halfway through your body here, and you walk up to something, and then it just was like ridiculous,
Yeah.
And it was very hard to play anyway.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to the platoon sergeant at the time, who me and another E6 were like, this dude, he could quote you every FM and TM, verbatim, commas, semicolons, bow legs, all this. But when it came time to apply that information, in the field or a training problem or whatever, dude, like I wouldn't follow the guy across the street. Like it was bad, right?
Yeah.
And he was trying to be like, oh, so your enlistment's coming up and blah blah blah. Are you gonna ETS or what are you gonna do? And I was like, well, I'd really like to go to Pathfinder school. I was like, and I'd like to see us get back to learning this job and doing this other thing, and not wasting our time. I was like, because my day-to-day job is important and I got to be there. And he's like, well, unless you re-enlist for another 6 years, I'm not sending you to any schools. And I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to any schools. It just started to get retarded.
Yeah.
Just really bad.
Yep.
So I was like, this is not a good use of my time. I think I've done what I could do, and it's time to focus, on the other thing that I wanted to do since I was little, and it's time to just see what we can accomplish here.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm not just responsible for my career at this point. I'm responsible to a team of guys that's, it's an additional responsibility outside of just showing up for shift. So that was, to me, it was time for me to go.
So you knew ahead of time that you wanted to do law enforcement. Did you roll right into that, or was there like a little window of time when you were not doing military or law enforcement?
No. Law enforcement started in 2007. Got out of the military, or the Guard, in 2013.
Okay.
Was when I ETS'd and said I'm not re-enlisting.
Gotcha. Okay. So you'd been doing it for a little while. When you first joined the military, when you first joined law enforcement, what did that look like for you?
A couple interview processes. So I had put an application in with the South Bend Police Department. I didn't get very far in that process. I was still, I think at that point, like newly 21, still very even though I was 21, I would say probably a little bit more mature than some of my peers that I grew up with, just because of the path that I had been taking, but still probably not ready to be doing that job yet.
Sure.
Honestly, maturity-wise level.
Gotcha.
So, and then had the motorcycle accident. So before even putting in for law enforcement.
Had the motorcycle accident.
Yeah,
Okay.
So I was getting off duty at the Armory in South Bend. I was done with the duty day, and it was a Thursday, and I'd finally had got the Harley that I'd wanted for years.
What kind was it?
It was a night train.
Okay.
Loved how it was it wasn't just all chrome, there was black and chrome accents together, so it offset and contrasted. It was a very sharp bike. I think it was one of my favorite Harleys at the time. It was a 2005. And had to get the pipes like my buddy's dad had on his Deuce. He had a Harley Davidson Deuce, and then he also had a Screaming Eagle Road King. So my buddy's little brother would ride the Deuce. I had mine, and then Rick would drive the Road King.
My dad's got a Softail.
So a Softail standard, or because your Softail family includes the yeah. It's been a hot minute. I used to be able to tell you all the different.
He bought it from Drew Estel's buddy before we ever knew each other.
Oh really? Small world.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Huh. Does he still have it?
Yeah.
Does he still ride?
Yeah.
Awesome.
He bought it to ride with his best friend who passed away a couple of years afterwards. So now he just kind of rides by himself.
I got you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. I feel like I should buy a bike, but then it's okay, we're gonna die together.
It could be something you and your dad do together.
Yeah.
You guys get out when the weather's nice and have a route that's fun and pretty scenic, you know.
Yeah.
That's what we would do, is we would do a couple different like organized rides throughout the year, but then we just get on. Like I spent a lot of time hanging out with, so like Rick was the guy who owned the Dairy Queens, and I had grown up with his son since like second grade. And so our families were like, it was basically like a second set of parents and siblings, you know, back and forth between the two families. And my grandfather, my mom's dad, was a flat track racer and a hill climber back in the day. And he restored a bunch of like old like Harleys and Indians and all that. Like Jay Leno hit him up one time, was going to purchase a bike from him.
Yeah.
Like had Triumphs, all this kind of stuff. So I wanted to be like, you know, my one granddad in the Army, and one granddad was like, you know, had been in a band, motorcycles, you know, racing, you know, that type of thing. And so I wanted to, naturally I wanted to, you know, get a motorcycle. So when I finally did and got into riding, I spent more time with like my grandfather and my buddy's dad and like his buddies, because that's what we would go do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the motorcycle accident, I was getting off duty, had changed, and was going to meet Josh at their Dairy Queen on the west side of South Bend, and we were going to link up, go to my sister's softball game, and then Hooters bike night. They had opened up a Hooters,
Wholesome.
and they had bike night. So like you could go get some crappy wings, you know, and just check out all the cool like bikes in the area.
Bikes, yeah. Check out
Yeah,
bikes.
and then they'd be like, you know, that we're there for the bikes.
Yeah. Nice pipes, bro.
Yeah.
Clinch. Gosh.
I didn't make it to the Dairy Queen, so I had left and was westbound on Western Avenue, and I don't remember the cross street. I used to be able to tell you the cross street, and going about 35 miles an hour. And at the time, I didn't wear a helmet, and it used to piss me off.
Of course you didn't.
Well, no, because like you gotta have the bandana, or like, you know, you want to feel the breeze, you want to smell like the wind afterwards.
You don't
like,
want to be one of these, you know,
like,
weaklings
like,
that wears a helmet.
Yeah, I'd be fine. But the thing is, though, is you know how like when people talk about when you like materialize, or what's the word where you like will something almost,
Yes.
where you're always like talking about
see
it,
it
and
into
you're
existence.
It's gonna happen.
yeah, like that type of thing. And for whatever reason, like nobody, like everyone's gonna be like, oh hey, you know, maybe get a helmet. It's like, oh, okay. So I had my Honda, you know, very first bike that I learned how to ride on. Then I had a Honda Shadow. And I'd laid both those down a couple times because it's just, you know, novice rider, something like going into a driveway that had sand at the you know, base, and you know, the back wheel catches it as you go down, the hand revs the shit out of the bike, and down you go, right?
Yep.
Or hit like, you know, people want to rake their leaves into the street instead of the edge of their yard, and you get leaf grease on the road. You know,
Get all squirrely.
flying into the front yard with the bike on top of you and being like, ow. So, but when I got the Harley, it just seemed like people were just adamant about the helmet, and to the point where it like frustrate the piss out of me. And so I'm driving down the road, and I'm coming to that intersection. I'm looking left, I'm looking right. I'm like, okay, I got the green. It's one of those intersections where you don't, like, you have a turn lane to turn north and south, but you don't have a specific arrow, so you have to yield right to the westbound and eastbound traffic. And I'm like doing my checks, and like nobody's running the light, awesome. And then all of a sudden, this little Daewoo turns in front of me, and it's at the point where now I know I can't go left because her car is long ways, and I can't go right. I'm not going to make it. If I lay the bike down now, there's a good chance I'll be pinched. And I went through like all in like this a matter of like however long it took in real life.
You were doing Rain Man calculations.
Yeah, like that. You know that meme where she's like confused and there's all the math problems.
Yes.
Yep. And it got to a point where I accepted the fact, this is it. Like I am fucked basically. Yeah. So at that point, I just had to let go. I was like, there's nothing I can do. I was like, completely and utterly out of my control. And then I remember waking up in the intersection. I don't know how long I was out. I know I was like in and out. I remember like this arm was up over my head, and I could see back this way, and could see my bike was all messed up. And I kept thinking like, oh man, I still had the paper tags on it. Like it was like new, you know what I'm saying? Just a beautiful bike just destroyed. And I remember trying to get up and then like not being able to. And I'm like, well, that's not right. So I tried to get up again, and I couldn't get myself up. And then that's when I felt a hand on my back, and I remember him saying, hey, don't get up. I got help coming. Stay right there. What's your name? And I'm trying to talk to him. He's like, can you spell your name? And I was like, my bike. He's like, don't worry about your bike. But before he got there, because he actually witnessed the accident. He was an off-duty fire chief. Thank God he was there. And he saw it, and people just kept driving around me and going about their day. Like, I'm laying in the intersection, and people were just like, huh, you know. And I remember seeing people on the sidewalk just kind of like pointing, and then realizing I can't help myself, and almost kind of like panic setting in. Like, why is no one helping me? Like, I'm going to like, you know, I can't hardly breathe. Next thing I know, I'm like in and out in the ambulance. They're like, where do you want to go? And I was like, the hospital. They're like, yeah, which one, you know? And I was like, thinking to myself, well, St. Joe Hospital, I've not heard good things. Let's go to Memorial. I was like, take me to Memorial, because that's like the good hospital. And then there was a lady who she rode, and this is stuff that like apparently she knows a lady who knows my mom or whatever, and there was this conversation after the fact. She asked if she could ride with me to the hospital. She's like, hey, I ride, like I'll go with him until like family or somebody gets there. And they're like, no need, he's not gonna make it to the hospital. So like they all thought, because I was bleeding, I guess, enough from my head, and from what they, like, I don't know, could physically see, they didn't think I was actually going to, like, be alive by the time I got to the hospital. And then, so in and out in the ambulance, on the operating table, or, like, where they initially bring you in, I remember just being in a lot of pain. This arm is still kind of stuck up this way. Or no, actually, my arm, they had moved it down. And so I remember just being very, like, clenched. That was actually not on purpose. Oh, man. Dude. Well, no, but like...
This is how we know we're in the right place at the right time. All the stars are aligning. Listen, this was meant to be. This was meant to be.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, brother. Clenched.
But that, like... The pain was so intense, like... I literally was just like, everything was like stressing or like curling in. I just remember being very like, ugh. And then the priest comes in, right? And I was like, oh my God, I think his name was Father Roberts or something like that. But when in 8th grade, but he's from Uganda, so he always had like an accent. And we always liked when he did mass. I knew him, but I don't think he recognized me at the time.
Oh man.
And he's like, who would you like me to call? You know, like he had his accent going, and I was like, call anybody but my mom. For love of God, do not call my mom.
Sure.
And he's like, well, we should call your parents. I was like, well, this is my dad's number. This is Rick's number. This is, you know, Rick's wife, Donna. I was like, call her, like anybody. And so he came back a couple more times, and he's like, no one's answering the phone. He's like, what's your mom's number? So I was like, all right. And so I gave him the number to the house, I think is when he finally got a hold of her. She said the phone rang. She was getting my little sister ready to go to Elise's game, and she hadn't left yet. And she's like, the phone's ringing. She's like, oh, I'll get it later or whatever, you know. And so it kept ringing, so she's like, well, maybe I better answer. So she answers it, and he's like, hey, are you Steven's mother, or is this Tamara? She goes, yeah, what's going on? Sorry. Sorry. And because I always picture her, like, and I know, like, when she was, shortly after I was born, her brother was in a pretty bad wreck and didn't survive, and I feel like, you know, bad about it, I guess. But I always like picture what she was going through, and so they told her what was going on, and she's like freaking out, and then. I told them that when they came back, she said, or the priest, or Father Roberts, was like, hey, we got a hold of your mom. They're going to get your dad, and they're coming here. I was like, well, do not let her. She's not allowed to be within an arm's reach of the table, because I know exactly what she's going to do. As I'm in a lot of pain, you can't let her touch me, like, at all. Like, everything hurts very badly. So they get there, and I had some friends in the South Bend Police Department. And so they had showed up and like kind of met my family and brought him back to where I was. And I just remember them like sitting there, and sister had her little softball uniform on, and they're like, "Oh, are you okay?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm great," you know. And my, you know, God bless my mom. She she was like definitely a trooper. Like, honored my request, stayed off the table. Like, didn't like want to hug or anything like that. Even though that's all probably she wanted to do. So, but yeah, it fucked me up pretty good.
What were your injuries?
When I hit the car, it took on the night train you have short dog bones that hold the handlebars, and they had drag bars, and there's forward foot controls, right? So the way you sit is kind of like a big C. So when I hit the car and I came up over the handlebars, this side, or maybe it was this side, because one of the handlebars actually gave and was bent all the way forward. The whole fork and everything was twisted, and those shocks were snapped. The frame of the bike had like a U, like almost like a half moon shape to it after the accident.
Gosh, dude.
And then the handlebar that stayed had pulled this leg out of the socket, and my hip came apart in like 3 chunks. Like, so, it looks like a big, your hip looks like a butterfly, that pelvic bowl. It was just 3 chunks. And so the femur and nothing, like it wasn't like attached, like it didn't like pop the leg off or anything, but it yanked it out. Torn colon, bruised spleen, 4 broke ribs that punctured and collapsed this lung, road rash, and then a couple good gouges on my head. And I went chest first into the A-pillar of her car and pushed all that in, and then continued like end over the car, and then landed in the intersection. But I don't have any like personal memory of that. The last thing I remember is just that was it. And the next thing I know, I was like on the ground. So like, your body, I guess, shuts some things down. Yeah. So you don't have certain memories or whatever. I don't know.
How long did it take you to recover from all that?
To be fully released from like doctor's care and everything, I think it was like 2 days shy of 6 months, because they kept telling me like, you're not gonna be able to, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And I remember dudes from the military coming in and like, I don't know what's gonna happen. And there was like still at that time, there were still things I wanted to do.
Of course.
In the military, so it really pissed me off. And so I was like, I am going to do these things. You're not going to tell me. And at one point I ended up at Cedar Point on roller coasters when I probably shouldn't have been, but but I was like, I'm going to, don't tell me what I can and can't do. So that's where that like stubborn nature, I think, kind of paid off a little bit. I say all that to say that I got transferred to a recruiting station down in Bloomington, and I started applying to the police departments down there. And totally, again, I think bombed the interview for one agency. I get in there and I was like feeling confident, feeling good. And I was like, yeah. And they're like, so what do you do if you and your partner go to a burglary at a jewelry store and he starts putting stuff in his pockets? And I'm like, well, I don't want to be a narc, but at the same time, like, that's pretty messed up, like, it just all went downhill, like, not being able to answer questions from that.
Shoot.
And I was just like,
I hadn't thought of that.
I don't know, man, like, why are you doing this? They're like, but would you tell us? And I'm like, yes. I'm like, I don't know, man, like, why are you hiring these people? Is this what I'm gonna have to deal with? And then the IU Police Department picked me up, and from there it was before I go to the academy, I got my academy date scheduled, and so for the next I think it was a couple months where I'd shadow different shifts, and the detectives one, that was the most god awful experience I think of my life, because for a whole week I had to help a detective comb through videos I didn't want to watch. Prior to going to the academy.
Oh my god.
And then he'd be like, well, I gotta go do some things. And so I'd be like having to watch these videos and document like every time a bathroom was different, describe the tile, what was going on. Because to also charge the crime, we had to prove that these happened within the county. We had to find the locations of what was going on. But it was just hours. It took a week to go through all this guy's videos.
Oh my gosh.
So this dude, third shift gets called to like one of the sports centers. They're like, there's this drunk guy in here in a jockstrap and a video camera, and he's creeping people out. So they get there, and
Sounds like me on a Tuesday night
they find this guy.
in my bathroom.
They find this dude, and he's like, oh, I'm just getting my stuff and leaving. And they're like, what's that video camera? He's like, don't worry about it. Well, he ends up getting arrested for public intox anyway, right? So then they get a warrant for the camera. And then on the camera, they're like, oh my God. And then they get a warrant for his trailer that he lived in.
Of course.
And this, so when they went to execute the warrant, I was like, well, can I go? They're like, yeah, you should, get to see different aspects of what's going on and things you'll be doing. And they key into this place because he lived alone. Like, they knew that there wasn't other people there, and it was like they had to like push the door open, and it was just walking paths and just stuff, just filth everywhere.
Jock straps everywhere.
I mean, there was a wind-up doll, like a little wind-up doll next to the TV that's what it did.
Dude.
And this dude had milk crates that he sat on. He had milk crates full of tapes. And he had one of those TVs with the VCR in it.
Was he filming himself, or was he?
Oh, he was filming
voyeurism?
Himself with people in the bathroom, doing a multitude of just foul,
Sure. Yeah.
I didn't know you could stuff that much stuff in places.
Oh my God.
At one point, the things that I saw, I was like, wow.
You weren't even in law enforcement.
Hadn't even gone to the academy at this point. It was bad.
I hadn't even gone to academy. It was already
he was like,
clutch.
I'm in.
I was like, this is great. Like, you get to deal with all this gross stuff.
And you get paid?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I didn't get paid. Well, no, maybe I did get paid.
Steve was like, I normally have to pay to watch this stuff.
Oh, God. Anyway, so this guy ends up going to prison because there was at some point, he had filmed, kids in a public bathroom going to the bathroom and...
oh, yeah, he's done.
Get
that guy.
Was the thing, though, was supposedly... So it was supposed to be 16 counts of voyeurism. And then there was also the child charges, for filming children. He was supposed to spend quite a bit of time in prison, but I think that he did not serve his full time, from what I understand.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Dude, I remember being 12 years old, had just gotten this new pair of And One shoes, going into the mall in Paducah, Kentucky, going to Sears, going to the first bathroom on the left, all the Sears buildings, and sitting down to to take a Duke. And noticing that on the where the toilet paper roll is, it looked like there were drill where someone had drilled through it, maybe where an older mount for toilet paper had been. And I was right in the middle of using the bathroom, and I just kind of noticed it, and light flickered past it, in the next stall, and I looked down, and there was no feet there. And I remember just putting my head down right to the hole, and there was a little eyeball twitching right there. And that was the first time I ever remember being truly terrified in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain it. I wasn't being threatened, but it was just it's that feeling of being watched, and then know you're being watched, and know you're a kid and you're vulnerable. And I just, pulled up my trousers and just burned out that bathroom, got out as quick as I possibly could. It's just, your story just reminded me of that. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, and it's,
there's creeps like that everywhere. And for every one you catch, there's probably 10 that no one ever knows about.
Sure. Yeah, probably. And that's unfortunate because, especially as and I'm not a parent, but you think hey, we're at the park, and I'm going to take my kid to the bathroom. That's supposed to be that's private, right? That's not, you don't want your kids being exploited. Mm-hmm. And that he would put his camera up to these, holes in the walls. And if, let's say, someone was, if he was here and the urinal was here, and if someone, say, left-handed, he'd be like, hey, what time is it? So that they would move their hand out of the way so he could get things on tape.
Hey, he was a master.
Yeah, he'd been doing this, I think, for quite some time. And when he talked, even in court, when I'm surprised his lawyer didn't have we don't want to show these videos in court. The jury didn't want to look at him, but they showed some of the videos, mm-hmm. and you could even in court, you could see in his face the enjoyment from his videos, even in court. The guy was just, I mean.
And he's walking the streets.
Probably at this point, yes. the whole experience was like awful.
Yeah.
It just, you can't say enough like how disgusting a lot of it was. Like,
So how did you go from that to like, I'm definitely doing this?
well, I had no choice. I'd been hired. I'm like, got academy date. Like, I was like, well, I don't want to be a detective. Like, you know, and then little do I know that when you go on the street and you deal with people just out in general, that you're going to run into all sorts of like things like, you know, that are disgusting. It's not always, you know, that like, I think evil.
Yeah.
You know, but there are a lot of disgusting things that happen.
I feel like the assumption is for many of us, and I've fallen into this as well, the assumption is that the people that cops deal with are just the people who, all you do is pull people over for speeding. Or maybe you get the 18-year-old or 17-year-old who stole a candy bar from the grocery store or whatever else. And it's very easy when you do not interact with the scum of the earth, the people who are capable of these horrible things that most of us can't even perceive or think of, that a lot of law enforcement has to deal with. Not all of those guys, but they have to deal with those kinds of people on a daily basis. And it's not just...
Well, it doesn't even have to be a daily basis, but when you do interact with some of these people, it's always enough to be like, ugh, you know, and depending on where you are, that might be an everyday occurrence, you know, how, like, what type of town you live in, you know, what your crime rate is like, you know, but it doesn't take a whole lot for you to be like, well, I'm not surprised anymore when you hear someone tell some like, oh my God, you got to hear this story, bro.
Right.
And you're just like, I can see
believe
that
it.
happening.
Yeah. Sheesh. Yeah, and all that stuff is hidden from a lot of us, which in many ways is a blessing. But it also needs to be, I guess, shared for people to understand the level of evil in the world.
Yeah. You know,
just walking the streets.
And you have, and I think I've talked about this a little bit before, but you know, humans are good at trying to like, we have to make sense of things. So we put people and things in like a singular category, right? And we rate things and depending on who you talk to, there's good and there's evil and there's nothing in between, right?
Yep.
Yes, there is absolutely evil and there is absolutely good. And all of us are capable of both. But you also have, you know, your everyday like gray area of, in the sense of, you know, have you ever thought something you shouldn't have, or have you ever, you know, been mad and said something you shouldn't have? And these are pretty weak examples in the sense of like your gray area. Is that a good thing? No. Are there people that have made poor choices out of desperation and necessity? I wouldn't necessarily call that evil, depending on, I guess, what it is, but it's not always so cut and dried with certain things.
Sure.
And when you deal with certain people, there was times like, you know, it's not fun to deal with the homeless, especially when you are working in a town that for some odd reason is like, yeah, bus them here and you shouldn't mess with the homeless. But then they go into like the neighborhood, say where the mayor lives. Well, you got to do something about these homeless. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And not all of them, you know, you don't just wake up one day because they want you to talk to them about people experiencing homelessness, like taking the person's like personal responsibility out of their situation almost, with that terminology.
Yep.
You don't just wake up one day and be like, oh, what happened? Right? Usually it's a series of bad decisions, or on the other case where there's a mental illness, right? So the more you deal with those people that, you know, are the homeless, or, you know, even people that aren't homeless that maybe have something going on, and learning when to identify that and to try to, you know, have a little bit of compassion or patience, you know, still be safe and, you know, you still need them to do a certain thing, or, hey, I can't have you here, or, you know, whatever, maybe they do need to go to jail or the hospital or something, but there's a difference between like, you know, you're just habitual, angry, mean drug user and someone who might have found themselves in that situation because of, you know, a mental illness. Sure. And there's nothing in these liberal towns that actually helps or gets these people, encourages them to better themselves. There's systems that they put in place. Like, if you have a place to sleep every night and you know it, why are you going to worry about getting a job and find a home? Yeah. If they're going to feed you, or if you know you can get arrested for something stupid and go to jail and get fed and have a place to sleep, like, you're not going to improve your situation. You're not going to be, you know, so all those like needle exchanges and all this nonsense these liberal cities want to enact, it just destroys the town.
Right.
Yep.
You take once a beautiful place and it becomes, it looks like a third world country. Yeah.
Like Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I may have mentioned this before, but I remember right as we were leaving 2 years ago, back in 2020, my wife and I were packing up and we had concluded we're not raising kids here anymore. They legalized certain amounts of meth on the streets. So I still have buddies that are cops in Portland that will see someone shooting up, and the assumption is, well, they probably have a legal amount and we can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. It's insanity. Yeah.
You almost got to think that that's like on purpose, to where they know what it's going to lead to or cause, because they want that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I remember back when, I think it was after George Floyd, when they started talking about like having federal law enforcement come into areas or take over certain agencies. Mm-hmm. The last thing we want is for our local, county, and state law enforcement agencies to become federalized.
Sure.
Look at Mexico, where the military and the police are basically the same thing, and they run around all the time. And I don't know any of them personally, but from what I understand, and I could be wrong, but there's a lot of nonsense and corruption and operating as rogue, whatever they want to do.
Sure.
And, at least when you have a local agency, if their leadership is worth their salt, when the public has a question, right, says, I don't understand why the officer handled this, or why this looks bad, right, the optics are bad. Why did this officer do this, or why did this officer strike that guy, or why did they get shot so many times, or why did, whatever. Instead of the agency going, oh, we're sorry. Educate. That's in my belief, that is part of the job of law enforcement, because all those guys are part of the community. They're part of that community that they serve, right? So I think the agency has an opportunity or an obligation to answer the questions. Obviously, don't give if there's an active investigation or some state, you can't answer right away, right?
Yeah.
But if the public has a question, why this or why that, like, okay, well, based on these statistics and these training principles and this and policy and the Constitution, right, this is why this decision is made. They're not always going to like your answer, but at least you've answered. You know what I'm saying? Like, just educate.
Right.
You're not going to please everybody, but at the same time, at least you've done your due diligence, and instead of throwing your officers out to dry in the sense of oh, we're sorry, we'll just, and now the public thinks, oh, well, they did something wrong. So now the next time they see something like that, they immediately think, oh, that's bad, and they don't understand the action. So,
so what brought you? So you had just kind of started out in law enforcement. You were doing National Guard at the same time. Where did you pick up the SWAT bug?
Oh, I think I saw the Colin Farrell movie SWAT. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
I did see that movie though.
What did you watch it on VCR?
Actually, the first time I saw it was a bootleg DVD that we got overseas.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that was the first. It was all grainy, and you couldn't tell what you were watching, but you could kind of make out what was going on.
You had subtitles in Farsi.
Yeah, some weird stuff like that, and the sleeve was not at all what the movie cover should have been or whatever.
Yeah.
It was something that I was always interested in, because it was it's a sexy thing, right? Especially if you're gonna get in law enforcement, the SWAT guys are they get all the cool kit, and they're seem to oh man, they're gonna kick the door and get the really bad dudes, and that type of thing, right? It wasn't until getting into it, earning a spot on the team, and kind of growing up in that environment around those guys, that I started to understand a lot of this gets kind of boring, and it may not always be glamorous, and there's a lot of hard work on the back end, and it's that I didn't understand some of that, but you don't really understand it until you're doing it for several years. So that's to answer your question. That's at first it was drawn to it because it seemed like it was a cool, that's the next step of law enforcement, right? So for me, I'm a patrol guy, but what are these other things that I can get into, and how involved can I be, that type of thing. So, and it took a couple years because our agency only had 2 people on the team. So it was made up of 3 agencies out of the 4 that were in the county. And I'd been having the chief. I was like, hey, it's we're part of the community too. And this is a pooled resource. It's like, maybe we should put some more people on the team. And, you know, the chief was a buddy of mine at the time. Like, we were friends before I got into law enforcement. So maybe that had something to do with, I don't know, but like, you know, and he mentored me a lot too, in the sense of like, I think I was late for an overtime assignment once. I'd worked night shift and there was like a football game, and he was like pounding on the door. He's like, get your fucking ass and get the thing, you know, like light the fire into me. So, you know, sometimes maybe disappoint some of the guys, you know, in that sense. But getting onto the team was definitely a huge goal of mine.
I remember you mentioning before, back when I was in SWAT shape.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what did you have to do to like train up to get on the team, and like maintain once you were on it?
So, like, physical fitness wise, it's very important, right? So, I wasn't one of the biggest dudes on the team, and some of these dudes are like made up of a lot of meat and kit. And if, say, something were to happen, and I was the dude that had to remove them from a situation, I need to be able to do that, right? Not just like pick up McCoy like on a training day in like a training uniform where we're basically slick sometimes, but like him in his kit and be able to move him, right? So definitely started hitting the gym a lot more. I think I was the only dude at the time that smoked, and there used to be a no smoking policy on the team like prior to me ever like getting on it. And I think that kind of went away, or wasn't like official. They didn't enforce it less with me because I could still do what I was supposed to do.
Well, they knew it unlocked your superpowers.
Yeah,
it's
that
like,
and the
it's like
caffeine.
Samson. Like, if you take don't let him cut his hair. Like, don't take away his cigarettes, because he'll be worthless then. Yeah, he needs that for his anger fuel.
So I really started taking the physical fitness thing way more seriously, because I would struggle with the PT test sometimes. Like, so like, for example, one of like, so let me back up just a little bit, and just so there's context. When you think about it, if you're getting on a team, if your team is a good team and they pay attention to the people that they want to bring on, your tryout started the day that the agency hired you. Like, you know, your track record, how do you work with your shift mates? Are you dependable? Do you do your work? Are you thorough? Like, you know, that type of stuff. Do you make good decisions on calls? Like, you know, that type of thing. So they'll talk to, you know, people you work with on a day-to-day basis.
Of course.
So then, like, for like the official tryout, you've got a shooting portion, which had like evolved over the years to where we're like, hey, some of these guys, I think maybe the shooting portion just be like maybe a general qual that they would go through. We'll just see what their baseline is, because you can teach the shooting portion of it.
Sure.
And then we like let them handle a couple of the different weapon systems that are more specific to SWAT, and just see like, okay, hey, they have a general idea. Then you have a oral interview where the team leadership is in front of you, and then you're in a chair, and the rest of the team is behind you. And they call you in, you walk in, nobody says a word to you, and they start asking you questions. And some of them are like, you know, decision-making ethical questions, like, you know, there used to be a policy that if you're going to respond to an active shooter, you must wait for at least one other person to go. And they're like, well, what happens if you go to this and you're there and your backup's like a minute out and you can hear people, you know, being killed? I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to go in. I can't just stand there. I was like, I don't think I could live with myself and just being like, you know, either a coward or you know, pausing, you know. And they're like, yeah, well, the policy says. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll get fired. You know, that type of thing. And so they're wanting to see if you have independent thought, you're not just a robot.
Yeah. Did your department at the time value independent thought? Because there's some places that don't.
When Keith was the chief, yes.
Gotcha.
When he passed, was kind of like the downfall, at least for my agency, where they don't want you being a cop and being proactive or doing anything.
They just want you to be a button pusher and a yes man.
Yeah. And that was, you know, one of the driving forces were and we can get to that, but then there's the physical, like the PT test, and we have to run the PT test twice a year to make sure everyone's still in physical shape. So it's full kit, like a 1/4 mile run, a low crawl for like, I don't know, 15, 20 yards or something like that. Then you hand off your rifle with your helmet, get your gas mask, seal it up, It's a lap around the fire tower, push-ups, grab a 50-pound weight, up 3 flights of stairs, hand your gas mask off, find your way back down in the dark, right, in a less than ideal lighting condition. Drop the weight, Connex box climb, tire flip, like 5 out, 5 back, and then there's like big-ass fire hose dummy, 15 yards out, 15 yards back, get your helmet rifle back, and then you finish with a quarter-mile lap. And when I got on, it was a 15-minute time limit, and dudes were starting to like burn that up. So then it dropped to, if you didn't get it done in 13 minutes, right, then you get put on probation, right? Same if you biff a qual, you get put on probation. You have this much time to do it again and pass. Otherwise, see ya type thing.
Could you do that today?
The PT test? Last time I was up there, they offered it, and I was like, I don't know, man.
We should recreate it.
You know what? Yeah. I'm curious. I wonder. I think I would, because like the first time I did it, I was like, I can't give up, I can't give up, I can't give up. I'm throwing up afterwards. Yeah. So I'm wondering if I could still be that stubborn in the current shape that I'm in.
Sure.
And still knock that out.
Yeah.
I am actually curious.
Sure. What was your consistent, like, average time?
I can show you what my best time was. I actually tracked them all. Do we have a moment while we discuss it?
Of course. Yeah.
There was, so like that's another thing, like tracking performance. When you talk about like learning a task or whatever, it doesn't matter really what the task is. But I used to keep track of my quals for shooting, and then I would keep track of the PT test times, because I started to get competitive with some of the dudes. Like some of the dudes were burning it down in like 8 minutes, just like blazing through this thing. They're like, maybe if you didn't smoke, you'd go faster. And I was like,
of course, yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right.
That's one of those things that
Are notes searchable?
Yeah, I think they.
Oh, PT test results. Bam. See, iPhones are amazing.
Quick.
So the first time I ran it, was a 1316.
And this is what year?
Oh man, 2010.
Gotcha.
I think was 2010.
We're going like 12 years back.
Has it been? Yeah, man. Oh man.
Yeah.
At one point, I was 205 pounds. That was too heavy for my frame and head.
You were 205 pounds.
But I wasn't like a fatty. I was like.
Yeah, but
I could lift stuff. I benched 315 pounds once.
I didn't think you were a fatty.
No.
Yeah, I wasn't like,
215 pounds clinched.
No.
Yeah, I was 205 clinched.
You're reaching there.
Yeah, so like a 1316, 1118, 1044, 1018, 1135, 1140, 1105. So that was when I started to get like heavier.
Yep.
And I'd be like, man, my body's working real hard to keep all this meat moving.
Sure, yeah.
And I was like, this is too heavy for my frame, because I used to go weigh myself at the gym, because I was like, oh yeah, I'm gaining weight. 1105, 1051, 928, 1030, 1010, 1008, and a 945.
How heavy was your kit? Like in general.
At the time, I think we had like Diamondback. We went from the big turtle kit to like the Diamondback, whatever it was. It was a little bit smaller. Sure. You could move in it a little bit better. And then I had and I think Hesco made these, but I didn't know who Hesco was at the time back in the day. They were the Delta standalone level 4 or whatever, and they were like uber thick.
Super thick.
Yeah.
Just beefy, just super beefy. So
front and back.
Yeah, front and back plates, and then soft armor on the side, and I think some of them had the soft armor through the shoulders. Gotcha. And then when I first got on, everyone's like, "Oh, I got my mags here, got my mags here." I'm like, "Why am I carrying all this shit?" Like, if I do fire, like my weapon in a structure, chances are, like, do I need an infantry combat load on me, or should I I can slim this down a little bit? So like. If basically I set it up to where if I had to take my plate carrier off, I'd still have belt line, pretty much the same stuff here, or vice versa. If I had to take the belt off for something, I'd still have, the necessary equipment on my plate carrier.
Sure.
And I ran a hammer on my back, so when I was like the number 2 dude, I was responsible for carrying some like breaching equipment with us to, if we had to do something interior or whatever, like poured a hole through a kitchen wall into a bathroom so we could see through a corner with the pole cam. And then when some other guys got on the team and roles kind of evolved, I got to hand the hammer off to somebody else, because that thing would like just drag your front plate. Like, you just be doing this all the time, yanking it down. So...
Gotcha.
But yeah, there's, trying to be in shape and be able to do and keep up with the other guys. So it becomes like a competition, and you want to make sure that, you're always going to make sure you can do what this guy can do, what that guy can do, what this guy can do.
Yeah.
So
I remember you telling me, well, back when we first met a long time ago, you had just gotten out. You had just retired from the police department or quit. Thinking back to the good days, whenever you were doing SWAT in the good days, like, what do you remember from those times? Were there like memorable moments that stick out?
So from like shift work, being an FTO for a long time was fun until it wasn't. But every once in a while you got to do something fun with the rookies, or you get to see a light bulb moment go off of one of them. And there was one winter that we got up on top of the basketball stadium, or whatever you call a basketball arena or whatever.
Sure.
And the roof is like sloped like this. So you come out of the door and it's like a drop off, and then it's basically a ski slope because it's covered in snow and ice. So we took the rookies up there, and there's a thing we used to do is there's badge numbers in the dust above the court from like years, right? So like as a rookie, when they get to a certain point, you take them up there and let them write their badge number.
Wow.
And the year in the dust and some of the rafters. And I was like, well, let's go up here. Let's go. Oh, look, here's the roof. This is fun. And so we took them out there. We were sliding down the roof a little bit and just having some fun. And then, went back to work.
Yep.
Like team shenanigans. So there used to be, Ian would get worked up. And he was one of the guys, along with myself, that the dudes knew they could push buttons. They could get you worked up and then just sit back and just enjoy what they've done. And some of the things that would irk Ian were the radios. They'd be like, hey, Ian, do we need to have comms? And he's like, why? Like in the mannerism. Like, so like if you ever seen me do this, that's an Ian mannerism. He's like, what are we doing here? Like, why would you not have your comms? Like, get your radios. Because I think one time somebody didn't bring a radio or whatever. He's like, what the hell? So that would be a recurring thing.
Gotcha.
They would would call us fashionistas because like, well, what uniform are we wearing for the training day? Like gray shirts, green pants, or what? And Mick's like, I don't care what we wear. Everyone would always be like, we need team shirts and T-shirts and all this stuff. And I can't remember exactly how the conversation went, but we were joking about like, oh, we'll just show up in like Daisy Dukes or this and that and the other. So I went and ruined a pair of jeans, and I cut them to where the pockets were longer than the pant leg.
Yeah.
And I showed up in a team shirt, those shorts, my boots, and my belt.
Yeah.
And they're like, what the hell's going on? Like, and I was like, ha, ha, ha. And then I went and changed immediately because I was like, I'm not wearing this all day. This is uncomfortable.
Well, that kind of stuff is, obviously me and Josh were never in law enforcement, but there's this thing with teams that a lot of people don't ever talk about, and that's camaraderie. Like if you don't have that, or if you do have it, it just makes everything else mesh way better than it normally would.
And you also don't have to spend very long around a team to pick up on these guys do not have glue. They don't have camaraderie. They don't work together outside of the job. They don't want to be around each other, and that can very quickly start to pull a team apart as well. If it's like, dude, I don't like being around these guys. Man, that just eats at a team quickly.
It absolutely does. One thing I actually noticed just this evening with you guys is you guys seem to have a good, it's not just about what you do, for your job, for lack of a better term. I know that you guys probably don't view this as your job. It definitely is something I believe you guys are very passionate about, but like watching you guys interact with each other and, your conversations aren't just about like, what's next for professionally, but you guys are discussing, just day to day, like your friends, you do things together, and it's very apparent in your actions and how you conduct yourselves.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be like an official team thing.
Yeah.
It could just like, community. It could be, back in the day, I don't think this happens anymore maybe, but like neighborhoods used to like shut the street down, do like summer block parties, and everybody knew each other and that type of thing.
Yep.
I miss that's what kept me there so long was my team.
Really?
And I sat down with Mick, our team commander at the time, and I was like, I'm struggling with some stuff, like, and I'm not happy. I was like, but I don't want to leave the team. I was like, this, I love being, wearing the same patch as these guys. I like working with them, being able to interact, He's like, the team can only make you so happy. He's like, you're going to ultimately have to make the decision that's best for you. And I think it was maybe 6-7 months after that, I think I couldn't be around that, like, not outside the team. The team was great, but the rest of the stuff, I was just like, I don't like I don't like my demeanor or whatever,
Yeah. What, you were kind of famous, a lot of people don't know this, but you were kind of famous in your state for the scathing resignation letter you wrote when you left law enforcement.
Yeah.
Can you,
Yeah, we can talk about that. It was, now if I went back in time to tell past me, I probably wouldn't tell me not to send the email, but how I sent it and the verbiage I used, I could have still made, I think, the same points. I think it still fell on deaf ears, but regardless, it was something I felt I needed to say to kind of almost a little bit of that closure.
Yeah.
Because there was no exit interview. Like the new chief was like, "Oh, you're leaving, and just come talk. We should talk about it first." Mm-hmm. I was like, "All right, hey, just let me know. I know you're busy. You tell me, and I'll make myself available." Nothing. So then, like, put my 2 weeks in. "Oh, we should really talk." I was like, "Hey, you let me know, and I'll make myself available." Last day came and went. And it was like I never even existed. And that's fine.
People like that don't actually want to know. Because
Yeah,
they already know the answer.
Yeah. So, like, maturity, like, I was just very emotional about it, I think. It was more of the response. I still stand by, like, the points that I was talking about. Mm-hmm. But the way I went about it could have been more tactful.
Sure. Gotcha.
So, like, being way, removed from the situation now and having time to think about it and,
sure.
Like, process that and be like, hey, it doesn't affect me anymore type thing. So I sent this email, and I didn't just send it to the chief. I didn't just send it to, like, the department.
You went full send.
It went to a whole lot of people.
Oh.
And then the people that read it and were able to share it before they deleted it from the server and immediately locked me out of the email. It got forwarded to people, like, at other agencies. Like, there were some dudes that printed it out and, like, hung it up.
Oh,
like,
man.
What was the gist of it?
And I think at one point in time I called someone a window-licking mouth breather, talked about a dude that was stealing time, who was a supervisor, who was, like, basically double dipping, and then trying to say that, like, come after me for stuff, that, trying to paint me as, like, not a dependable person. The decision promoting people that had, like, flat out been caught in lies to the chief, was willfully not doing things that that needed to be done or that should have been done. Promoting people that care more about, their career than doing the right thing. Like, I let them have it. Yep. And at the end, I was like, the last, 10 years and 9 months or whatever it had been, it was just shy of 11 years. I was like, has been, and then I didn't, how, like, you used to be able to draw emojis or make them with the different, like, yes. parentheses and stuff? Yep. It was the face, like, we're just like,
the shrug.
Yeah.
I don't know
so,
what
like,
I
put that at the email and was like, peace out, mother suckers. And bam, that was it. So I hit send all and let it rip. Because what led to that was we had good officers that were there that could have, like, if you invested in them, right? Because they were investing a lot into the agency as a whole, like, and the other officers trying to be, like, an asset, whether it would be, the few FTOs that were still, like, trying to do the job, do a good job in teaching officers, not just letting people slide or grading them on things that really weren't issues, but they didn't have the confidence in themselves as an officer to even be a trainer.
Yeah.
Right? So we were losing good officers to other agencies in the state and other states, which, good for them because they got out and have been, some of them are doing way more than they used to do now, like,
sure.
In some pretty dangerous areas. But not a word was said when these people leave. But you got, like, some dude that was a waste of space, retires, and then there's sheet cake and a party and all this stuff. Not that I wanted a sheet cake or a party.
Sure.
Right.
But there was, so the police department had a program where there was like adults with special needs that would come and like clean or have like a job, like have tasks to do, because don't just keep them in a home. Like, you know, it would not necessarily give them something to do, but it gave them, you know, like a job. They could earn money doing it, that type of thing. But they didn't work for the police department. And one time Cheryl shredded somebody's casework that they'd been working on because he left it unattended. But I was sitting at home. I think I just got back from the gym, and I was like burning my time. Like I didn't have to go in anymore. And there was an email from the chief. Oh, Cheryl's put in her 2 weeks, and you know she's going to be retiring from the police department, and there's going to be a sheet cake and a card, and I read that, and I was just like, and then Garth hits me up. He's like, "Do you see that email?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, as a matter of fact, I did. And at first, it didn't bother me. But the more I think about it, it's really starting to piss me off.
Sure.
I was like, she doesn't even really work for the police department, you know?
Yeah.
And we're doing sheet cakes and parties for her?
Sure.
I was like, he's like, they didn't say nothing when you left. Like, they treat you like garbage. And I was like, I know.
Right.
And then I was like, you know what? I'm sending an email. He's like, I don't know, man. I was like, no, I'm doing it. And I spent like the next like hour and a half typing this thing out. And I was making sure punctuation and spelling and like, I was, you know?
Professional.
Yeah, real professional. And then it was like, bam, send. And I was like, yep, yeah, it feels good, you know? And at the time, it really did. Like, my buddy Levi was like, bro, you could have sent that at the better time. He's like, they are all here today, and they are running around here like freaking out about your email. And I was like, well, good. Maybe it'll do some good.
Right.
Well, this is like, what you're describing is something I feel like it's happened, I guess, probably since the beginning of time, but we see it more and more in today's world, and that is you have these professions that need guys who live to a high standard and who, you know, push the envelope, but also like are good people, like they're trying to do the right thing regardless of what policy is and all that stuff. And slowly but surely it seems like in a lot of these professions, leadership works its way, you almost have like, it's like somehow or another incompetency infiltrates leadership, and you see these good people who train diligently, who try hard to do a good job, and who are well regarded among their peers almost get pushed out. And we see this happening in law enforcement, in the military with, you know, all the jabs and like guys who had spent their whole career, you know, decorated people, respected amongst everyone that they work with, have to leave. What would you say to guys that were kind of like in a similar situation to you at the time, but today they work hard, they're well regarded, they're respected, they do the right thing, but they see the writing on the wall that everyone above them celebrates incompetency and celebrates inaction? What advice would you have for them?
I'd say that they're going to have to gauge the waters of their situation in the sense of like, can I truly make a measurable positive effect here? Or am I just talking to a wall? And you have to take, you know, your assessment of that situation, because I can't make that decision for anybody. You know, really nobody can, you know, from agency to agency or whatever. And if the answer is I'm going to end up wearing myself out for no reason whatsoever, and if you still have value to add to the profession, I would search real hard for an agency and that has a good leadership, that seems to, you know, support the community in a sense where they take the job seriously, they're not just there for their rank, that they invest in the personnel at the agency. Because if you have better trained officers that are able to make smarter decisions, it doesn't always have to be like traditional, like always firearms training or always this training, but, you know, not just PowerPoint stuff, but like an agency that invests in its people, right? And if it encourages, you know, continued growth learning wise, I would say go to one of those agencies, right? Go be a part of that community. There's only so much you can do before you're just, you know, the guy that as he gets to the parking lot, he turns from happy to I'm gonna get my keys, I'm gonna load my car, go to roll call, don't talk to me, I'm out. I'm not gonna be proactive. If you send me on a call, I will take it. But other than that, I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
Right? So I would say that they're gonna have to take stock of their situation, make that assessment. Can I affect any positive change here for the betterment of the agency, my fellow officers, policy, and for this community? If the answer is no, either get out and start something and be the master of your own universe, right? And see what you can accomplish, or find an agency that supports, that type of, individual.
And to take a piece of that wisdom that you threw out there and apply it to people who are maybe stuck, like I felt, in a state, paying taxes to a state, or sending kids to the public school where you live, or even to a private school that's teaching things that you don't necessarily agree with, families interacting with other families at the park, at church, at whatever else, and you're starting to feel like, again, being that I moved from Portland, Oregon a couple years ago, feeling like I am now investing my resources, my time, my energy into a community that I don't necessarily agree with. That as well can be applied, where you can ask yourself, maybe, if you feel so inclined, pray about it, try to find some wisdom and conclude, do I have the opportunity? Because not everyone has the same resources. And some people may conclude, yeah, I have the opportunity to make a change here. And other people may have to conclude, I'm not going to keep paying taxes here into this state and feeding this system. Whereas you, maybe in law enforcement or anyone else in law enforcement, realizes my time here is falling on deaf ears. I'm talking to a wall. They're oblivious to who I am, the hard work that I'm putting in. I have camaraderie with my guys, even if we're just going to the range on our time off, or we're competing with our quals when we do need to be there and we're having a good time. But if law enforcement is taking, or a state or a government entity is taking from you and turning it into nothing, and all of your hard work is being honestly just thrown in the gutter, and you're not able to put your hard work or your finances into something that grows into a better thing for your kids in the future, or leaving an agency better than you found it, it may be time to reevaluate and conclude, unfortunately, it's time for me to relocate.
Yeah. And it sucks, because you may be like, I really enjoy where we live. Right. Or, like in the sense of, like a house is a structure, right? But over time, that becomes a place that is, there's memories, right? The wall, if the walls could speak, right? There may be friends that you do have in those areas, or even family that you don't want to be apart from. So I think on like the everyday citizens side of the coin, or their perspective, or their scope or lens, it's important they do take that stock and that evaluation and make make a decision. It's not going to be easy. It's definitely tough. But I think, for families that have to do that, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of investment in risk involved with that. But it could pay off very well for them. They could put them in an area to open up new opportunities and allow them more freedom. And I hate to verb it like that, but you live in America. You should have the freedom to, seek after goals and try your hand at things. Obviously, not like bad things, but to be our own masters of our future and the course of our life, in the sense of, do I want to start my own company, or do I like where I work? Do I want to advance within the company that I'm at? Do I want to get more involved with the church, or is this church screwy? That type of thing. When you have to move to a different area, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Change is hard.
It is, but sometimes very necessary. I will say that fear of the unknown, at least for me coming out of law enforcement, because all I ever did was the military and law enforcement. I was like, what other skills do I have? Oh my God. But even though it was uber scary, it was almost like there was like a weight that came off. And I was like, well, what could I do? What could I see, happening, or what opportunities are there to go try my hand at? Because if I succeed, great, initially it was like, if I succeed, it's on me. If I fail, it's on me, and I could be mad or happy with myself.
Yeah.
You know, flash forward to today, and now it's, if I succeed, it's not just me, it's my team and I.
Right.
You know, in the sense of like this new team that is the company or whatever. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I probably wouldn't have been able to do, and even though we're not where I want us to be at this point, a lot of the success has to do with the hard work of people that I interact with on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. So, okay, Ripcord, let's get into that. Well, I mean, I think the biggest question is, a lot of people will be interested in, like for me, I love putting guns together. I've never really considered, how do I take this block of aluminum and turn it into an upper receiver? Or what materials go into, I mean, I guess I enjoy researching and figuring out, like, what is MP testing and HP testing, and why does one company's bolt carrier group last longer than another's bolt carrier group? What's good staking on gas keys and such? But I haven't gone nearly as far as you have with like actually manufacturing firearms. How did you even get that bug?
Wow. This could go back a while, you know. So one of the first times that I was able to actually put one together from like your pile of springs, detents, the lower, the upper, putting all of it together, not just putting an upper on a lower or buying one off the shelf. A buddy of mine from years ago, Keith, had owned a gun shop, and he had a range there. And it was him that first introduced me or showed me how to actually get into it. And it was, at first I was like, I don't want to know, I just want the gun.
Sure.
If I put it together, what if I do something wrong? He's like, no, that's why we're doing this, you're going to learn. And I was like, all right. And so he started showing me where this goes and where that goes. And after the first couple times doing it, you're like, well, this isn't so overwhelming or daunting of a task. And so that kind of got the bug started. And also growing up, I'm kind of like my grandfather, where it's cool to know that something works, but why or how? Like, you know, but why? You know, like,
Yeah.
very curious kid in the sense of, you know, wanting to ask questions, and that kind of, you know, stayed with me as I grew up. So after that initial, you know, couple builds, I was like, I think the muzzle device ended up coming off at a range day because I didn't have it on there properly, so it like worked itself off. But understanding, you know, making mistakes, you know, using subpar parts or putting them together wrong, trial and error, that kind of got the bug going for me.
Yep.
Back when I was, 19, 20 years old.
Yep.
That's what initially got me into it.
So you were, even before, or maybe even during the military and law enforcement, you were enjoying the process of putting these together, from maybe a lower parts kit and assembling a lower? Is that kind of, you were doing that for a little while?
Yeah, he showed me, worked me through putting all the tiny parts into the lower, getting all that squared away, and then I think we put a couple upper receiver groups together. So that was the first time I actually built an entire AR myself.
Okay.
With his guidance, obviously. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have come out very well.
Do you tinker in other things in your own life? Like, do you enjoy taking, let's say, cars apart, or anything else that you're like, no, I love tearing things apart and figuring out how it works? Or, because for me, I could probably figure out how to take my dirt bike apart. I've done it a few times. It's not a joy.
No, and honestly, if on the rally rat side of things, with like the trucks that we've built,
Right.
You know, we do all our work ourselves. For me, that's more of a loose term because I have to get the guys to help or supervise me.
Sure.
Or I'm just like, hey, Albert, can Vitali do this? And I'll just pay for it to be done.
Right.
I do not enjoy working on honestly, that's my least favorite thing, is working on the trucks, because I'm like, this is also my daily driver. I can't afford to be like, well, I don't have a truck for a week because I tore something apart I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
You know, like, so I'm always asking questions about that.
Sure.
With this stuff, though, you know, with the rifles, that to me is a manageable task. Like, I've done that long enough to where I'm in that mode of, yes, there's still things I think I could get better at, or there's different things I can learn, and you know, now I'm getting into the part where it's like material choice for different parts. Like, that's important. So it's not just like, hey, I want this part to work, or I want to just source a part. It's like, if we're going to make it, or if we're going to use it, we need to make sure that it's the appropriate, even like the material that it's made out of, type thing.
Yeah.
What?
Go ahead. Send it.
So one of the things that, I mean, I've known you for quite a while, but there are hundreds of rifle manufacturers in this country. I mean, just tons of them. You know, you roll a dime down a hallway, you're going to hit 20 of them. So what always kind of blew my mind was how right out of the gates, I mean, like right as soon as Ripcord started making rifles, they were immediately well regarded. What's the secret sauce? Like what? Like how? For a lot of companies, it takes a long time for them to build a reputation of being super high quality, almost like that hand-picked, handcrafted feel. What's like? How did you do that?
And I wish there was more full, like, from us rifles out there. You know, we've struggled with some ups and downs over the last couple of years. You know, learning some hard lessons and just learning a lot of like stuff about business in general. But to answer your question, it takes some OCD. I think it's very important to be very detail oriented. And I think that if you look at some of these companies that have been around for a while, have been successful for many years and grown, like BCM or Daniel Defense or Knights, or even though Colt's not Colt anymore, those companies have been around for a long time, and they've been doing this for a long time, right? So they don't just make, say, ARs. There's like other variants that they do and different calibers they've gotten into, and so they've created those opportunities to grow and build a good name for themselves. But guys that are getting into this, and I know that you can dime a dozen, newer manufacturers, smaller, larger, whatever. I think it comes down to also not just accepting, like, when you have blems, or, it's like a common term, like a blemished part. Now, a blem could be, like we have some on the shelf right now, like the LDR 1.5s are finally starting to come back from anodization, to give an example. And I've got a bunch of them on the shelf that are set aside for, like, ano, and it's not necessarily the ano house's fault. I don't want to sound like I'm dogging them, but when you got like the process of ano, it doesn't always come out the way like you need it to. And the part itself is good, but the color isn't the right, like it's not within the tolerance that we are going for. Yeah. So not just being like, well, this is what you get. Because that's we are. So when we talk to anodization companies, they'll be like, well, we'll make a part for you. We'll make a sample, and it can be as perfect as you want it. But going forward, like, you're just going to get what you get. And then the companies are like, well, they get panic, right, potentially, or they're just okay with being like, we'll just put a disclaimer on the website and put it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, we stopped putting the upper receivers out because, one, we were moving manufacturing from one facility to another. And while we were doing that, we were also taking the opportunity to improve on some of the products. So we noticed with the upper receivers, we could be doing a better job on fitment to the lower. And there's a couple features within like a mil-spec blueprint that don't really jive with, say, our rail in the sense of how I want it to index. So improving certain features of the upper receiver so that out of the gate, like, we know, like, hey, when you use this upper with our rail, like, bam, it's going to be good to go, right? Customers have also given feedback saying, like, they prefer thermal fit for the, seating the barrel. Okay, cool. Yeah. We can do that. We'll do that, right? So having the attention to detail to, look at what your goal is, right? Not accepting less than and just putting it out there because you freak out and you're just like, I just want to make a quick buck, right? Because it gets daunting at times when you look at a batch of stuff and you're like, well, we're going to have to delay it. I'm going to have to have this fixed, or I'm going to have to replace, make new parts, that type of thing. Because that's my name. I'm responsible for the quality. I'm responsible for my employees. So if we put out crap product and that's the name we build for ourselves, and we just, say screw it, I'm not doing my team any favors. So making sure that, you have that discipline not to freak out and just be like, just send it out and we'll replace it later. You know what I'm saying? And we've had stuff go out and maybe we should have caught something here and there, and people will hit us up and say, hey, and we're like, you know what? Here's a return label, send it back. I can either replace it or I can refund you. Like, hey, we're very mindful of that. So it's kind of like a broad stroke answer, but I think attention to detail, not accepting less than what you want or what your goal is, and having the discipline to understand that that's probably a longer road to like what people would view as success if you're going to equate it to money, because you're not really like, especially nowadays, especially with the way the costs of things are, just on our end of material alone, which then like when people don't want to work, right, in the situation that this world is kind of in right now. So then like people's time is now more valuable in the sense of like these people have to do more. So they're it's like machine time. The guy that runs it, he's got to get paid. The costs, are going up on various things. So if you want to also be competitive and trying to protect the customer as best you can from paying ridiculous astronomical prices for things, your margins aren't like major too. So like it can get scary. Like,
but you're playing the long game.
I would prefer to be around.
Whereas
like
a lot of people are playing the short game whenever it comes to making products.
I'm too old to start over again.
I feel you on that. It's essentially doing the right thing, knowing that it's going to cost you more than if you were to take the easy way out, but applied to making a product is what it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yep. That's actually a pretty efficient way of putting it.
Even if it's going to cost you financially as well.
And it has over the years.
Yeah.
There's been times where, and even now recently, like all the updated version of the rail, like we were supposed to be able to get that out by the middle of the month, but outside processing like coating, phosphating, anodizing it's taking more time than it should right now.
Sure. Yeah.
Part of that is our fault for sending the amount of parts that we did, because I'm sick of doing batches.
Sure.
I would prefer to be a website that if we're going to have something out of stock, it's not a very long time and people don't get frustrated. And I would prefer that people have access if they want to use our stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the goal was full send,
Yep.
But this is a premium rifle. Like,
I hand build all of it.
Yeah, like if I just needed a daily driver, I'll just go out and buy a Corolla, right? I know it's not going to be perfect, even though Corollas are pretty baller. But if I want to spend the coin on something premium, okay, it better be perfect.
Right.
And if that means I need to wait for it or need to be on a wait list, like, that's the quality I'm looking for.
So with that in mind,
I don't want it to be halfway done.
No, of course. And so with that in mind, you could look at a company like, let's just say Knights versus Springfield Saint or a Smith & Wesson Sport 2, not to dog on the Saints or Smith & Wesson, because what they do in the industry fits a role. And it is valuable to have those companies in that role. I could probably take a shot as to why, but you can, I'm sure, answer this question better than I could. Why are some rifles, let's say $3,200, $3,500 for an AR-15 as opposed to $1,000? What the heck is it? Are we going into material costs? Are companies willing to ship parts that are out of spec and they're just good enough that they barely work? Are they picking factory second springs? What's going into all these parts?
So to answer that question, and it's not that I'm trying to be political about the answer, but what you have is you've got a mix of things. You have companies that have built a good quality reputation, right? And they may be able to charge because they know that their work and their effort is worth that, right? Because the consistency of their performance and, when you get a part from them, more often, 9 times out of 10, you don't have to worry about it.
Sure.
Right? They have attention to detail and they take the time to make sure their stuff is like really good to go. You also have companies that I think sometimes have gotten to the point where they're like, oh, well, this is our name and whatever. And now we're just trying to make as much money as possible and capitalize on a situation to where maybe they are slacking in an area, or they're trying to save money here or there on parts. It'd be nice, and I sometimes have this habit of looking at some of these larger companies and being like, oh, well, they're able to do this, this, and this. And I have to remind myself, we're not there yet. You know, like, as time goes and as we grow, we will have access to be able to do more in-house, or to have, like, you know, buy our own machine instead of basically renting time on a machine and working with other engineers, right? So like some of these companies that are making in-house every single part, that, like the major parts, usually springs and detents and those type of things, are coming from like a few other sources, right, that everybody kind of pulls from. But those guys, their overhead is a little bit less than, say, probably mine, because I'm having to, you know, work with other companies in the sense for some of the stuff. So you've got that, right? Some of the stuff that they sell could be a niche product, in the sense of, you know, hey, this is generally a government contract item, and we know it's popular, and so the demand for it is there, so they probably can charge a little bit more for that thing, because, you know, guys like the cloner, like I'm guilty of it, the cloner nerd stuff, right? So you have a mix, I think, of they've earned the ability to charge what they do for their things, because they know that the demand is there, and their craftsmanship and their work ethic, all that is top notch.
Sure.
So that's where you get, I think, some of the costs, and then also too, you've got the materials, material costs, depending on what they're doing. You know, like some guys use, and we get asked about this too, like titanium barrel nuts for stuff, right? Because it does good with heat. It's strong, but it's lighter than steel. It's also ridiculously expensive to machine because it eats up tooling.
Sure.
Right? The material itself is more expensive, so there's going to be added cost with stuff like that.
Gotcha. So you can have who's manufacturing it, are they able to do all of it in-house? What's their QC process? How talented are the people that are actually manufacturing those parts? How long have they been around, and have they been able to keep a clean reputation for a long period of time? And a reputation is worth, when you're buying a product, money. And then, did I say material costs? Obviously, that's a huge part of it as well. What if you're going to go buy a rifle? Let's say it's your rifle or any other gun, a complete gun. What's the most expensive part? And then question part, like number 2 on that as well, is where do you want to spend the most amount of money when you are, so what costs the most when you are assembling a good firearm, and then at least an AR-15, and then also where do you want to spend the most of your money?
So I'd say depending on the barrel you go with and its quality, like I'm not talking about like just someone says it's good, but is it a good barrel? That could be one of the more expensive parts, and it's an important part. You want the barrel to be well made. You want it to be something that can, you know, has rifling for one. I know of some companies that have let barrels go out the door when there's no rifling, and they're just like, meh, we'll replace it. Your bolt carrier group, depending on some of the engineering and the design work and the time that it took to test, and have they, you know, are they using like a new fancy material that's supposed to be better than, say, you know, there was an 8620 steel for the carrier, or C Carpenter 158 for the bolt? Like, has that thought process gone into it? If you look at, I think it's Knights, has those like sand cutter grooves, like it's something simple, but at the same time, like that was something they thought out, and they're like, hey, how do we help clear debris or keep the gun running, right?
Yep.
Some of their bolts have that dual extractor.
Yep.
To where, not dual extractor, but the
Dual
springs
injectors.
within the, to ensure that the part's going to work, you know, 60% of the time, all the time is the Anchorman.
Yep.
So that could be another, you know, expensive part, but also a very important part.
Yeah.
From there, there's other parts that sometimes are expensive, but I think unnecessarily, you know, like, again, maybe name, or it's something that a company doesn't do anymore. So when you do find that thing, it's limited quantity, so it will drive the price up. Like, there's some lower receivers that are uber sought after that will go for a pretty penny, even just stripped. That just so someone can say, I've got it, I've got that one.
Which goes back to the name and the reputation, or just the perceived value.
Or even like the features that go into it. Like, it is popular now, a lot of the ambidextrous type stuff. And I think more so for the left-handed shooters. And I know that there's some people that are right-handed shooters that are like, oh, but if I'm shooting on my weak side or all that kind of stuff, like, okay, probability, possibility, that type of thing. Like, do you, as a right-handed shooter, absolutely need
a mag release on that side?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, but again, I don't want to fault people for seeking those things, or that might be important to them for whatever reason.
Sure.
That's their decision to make.
So you started, yes, you've built this rifle, but the other thing is you started a business. You started a small business. I know we've kind of talked before about vertical learning and horizontal learning. Like, what has that been like? Not just building a great rifle, but building a business out of it. Like,
I don't know what to do with my hands. I tell you what, man. You don't know what you don't know,
It's a lot of no's.
It is.
Yeah, KNOWs. Yeah.
Again, thankful very much for my current business partner. She has been amazing, and I probably wouldn't, we wouldn't be as far as we were if she wasn't around handling some of the stuff that even today I'm like, how do I do this? And she's like, I've explained this to you. And I'm like, yeah, but I have to do it a few times for it to stick, But
you've known how to build guns for a long time.
Yeah, but how do I take that skill and how do I market it? How do I there's a lot of back end stuff with business that I still struggle with.
Where have you had to stretch the most? Where have you had to really step outside your comfort zone? Building the rifle, that's your comfort zone.
Oh, absolutely.
Where have you had to stretch?
I don't market very good, for one.
You don't.
At all. And I think we've had this conversation before. It's like, I don't want Ripcord, I've kind of let it become more of like a hermit company. We kind of post here, we'll put a newsletter out. It's like, we could be doing more, not just being like, hey, we have this thing for sale.
Sure. Yeah.
We could be doing more in that area, in the sense of just, here's how you do this. Mm-hmm. And we have those videos on our website, but again, are they the greatest videos in the world? They're informative, but they probably don't capture people's attention.
Sure. And
they may not know about them because I don't post on Instagram as much as I probably should, or do YouTube videos.
Well, you are busy running a business and building premier rifles. So.
And that kind of was my excuse for a while, in the sense of, people just don't understand, I have to sit here and talk to, I didn't know, I had to pay taxes every month. I thought it was tax season. We do the taxes then. We still have to do the taxes then, but I owe, the state of Tennessee or the federal government, or, when we sell stuff to other states that do sales tax, I owe them money.
Yep.
Every month. This is some BS. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The different licenses, just, you have to be licensed within your county, your state. You have to have that stuff on file. Oh man, what else? Insurance, business insurance.
The business side.
Seeing those bills makes you want to gag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
It's definitely, and I'm having to step in that role a little bit more, so it takes me away from some of this other stuff, and it's definitely, it skews you out, because you're like, oh, I don't want to do the wrong thing, I don't want to, I don't want to get hit with something stupid, that type of thing. But the marketing excuse is, people don't understand all this back end stuff, and then I get tired. At the end of the day, I'm like, I don't have the mental capacity to sit there and do a live, or film a video, or sometimes I'll get out to the range and I'm just like, I'm not. I just need to get this work done, because now I got to go back and put out a fire, at the shop, or, oh man, I got to make this phone call. There's a phone call I should have made Monday and I haven't even done it yet. You know what I'm saying? Stuff pops up, and that's an area where I need to get better at, is being like, hey, I need you to take care of this. Just do this thing. I need to step back from some of these other roles so that I can focus on this and the marketing and more of the design work and that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Yep.
It's all you're always juggling. You're always juggling.
Gotcha.
It gets out of hand.
What's next for Ripcord?
I really hate the fact that I keep saying For us, this year is about cutting some fat, making sure that we actually are able to streamline some of these manufacturing processes, which people will start to see the results of that here in the very near future. Going forward with, how efficiently can we take from getting the raw material, processing the raw material, coding, QC, product package, photos, website, that kind of thing, right? Yeah. What I'd like to do is get some of our individual parts back out on the website, get that process flowing, get some of these dealers that have been wanting to offer our product on their site, get that process running and get the bugs kinked out of that. More educational stuff being put out, more value for the end user, because just like with training, you're probably going to spend more time on your own than you are in a structured class. So being able to maintain my tools myself and understanding, if I need to build or rebarrel or replace, how to do that, how to do it well, or at least I guess my flavor. And then from there, collabing with companies that have goals that are very kind of similar to ours, or like that their attention to detail is the same. They nitpick things, and they'd be a positive, relationship to have, and being able to offer more in that sense, right? Talked with a buddy of ours the other day, and I'm gonna try real hard to, by the end of the year, offer rifle, like a full rifle.
Good.
And I know people are kind of they're up my rear end about when's the upper receiver groups and when's this and when's that, and I think I want to jump to this, because this I think will be received well. When I say this, I'm pointing. I don't know if people can't hear the. Yeah. I'm pointing at one of our complete rifles on this desk here. That's what I would like to see us doing by the end of the year. There's also a couple products that we're adding to, like the rail line. We're updating the upper receiver, but I think full builds offered with. It'll be a 13.9. I'm not doing 18 million different rifles. Again, managing what we can do. Instead of like a customer goes, well, I really like this. Oh yeah, okay, we'll do that. A customer wants this color. Okay, yeah, we'll do that. And then spreading ourselves too thin. But offering a 13.9 with either a pinned 3-prong or the forward controls, like Dead Air, the one that Forward Controls makes. Yeah. One of their flash hiders pinned, or the Hux.
Yeah, Hux works.
One of their muzzle devices pinned.
Sure.
So like that's your options. And and they'll be just all one color.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you want to jazz it up, spray paint it, or you can buy a different color part or whatever and switch it out. But for what we can realistically manage, and be able to offer people, like there's something very iconic about a black rifle.
No kidding.
So
Yeah.
I think that'll be okay.
Yep.
Well, I remember hearing stories about how, one of the things that a lot of young people today struggle with is what do I do with my life? Well, our great-grandparents never really struggled with that. There weren't many options. They just did something. And we see this concept play out in grocery stores too. You go up to the cereal aisle and you're like, oh, which one of these thousands do I pick? If you had two options, you'd pick,
the preferred.
yeah, real quick. You pick your Lucky Charms real quick. It's the same thing with rifles. There's so many out there. And I hop onto some of these websites and it's like, man, what do I get? It's like, there's a lot of value in keeping it simple and perfect. So.
No, I absolutely agree. And if you get on the website, some of the upper receiver groups don't even appear there anymore. Because I don't think that's going to be an item that we stock on the website. Now, if somebody's like, hey, I have this barrel, and I would prefer that you build it for us, okay, cool. Then there's a form for that. You can send your barrel in, and we can put some stuff together for you, right? But to really, and it's going to be a while before I hire somebody, before I can hire somebody. But then to be comfortable with, oh, yeah, Larry just built 10 upper receiver groups, and he test fired, and I didn't have to go and be there for every step of the process. It's going to be a while before I'm able to do that. So I know I can handle X, Y, and Z and get that done.
Yeah.
It is like herding cats when you're working with other companies sometimes, because they've got their own thing going on as well, right? So they're busy. We're not their only customer in some cases. So that's another thing is managing a lot of the moving parts just to get so you can build your thing.
Sure.
Yeah. What excites you the most?
What excites me the most is after all the problem solving that we've been doing, right? When you get those small wins where something finally works out and goes the way that you planned it to, that definitely puts a smile on your face, and you get to like breathe for a second before you're right back into the next, like, okay, we got to tackle this or keep momentum going, or what can we be doing right now to set us up for tomorrow, that type of thing. The small wins. Right now, it's the small wins.
Yep. That's cool.
Good, dude.
Yeah. Well, should we end on a story? Do you got a story that's going to make people clench?
Yeah. Man.
From all your time in SWAT, from...
Well, there's a time I almost shot a drug dealer's mom, or how I got my nickname.
Oh, nickname.
I'll take a nickname.
Yeah.
I feel like I already know I don't actually know it, but it's like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, tell me about this nickname.
Yeah.
So your nickname is Pinkman.
Yeah.
Which I thought was your last name for the longest time until I had to send you a wedding invitation. I was
You're like, what?
Who is this?
So the team dudes, man, they knew that they could push buttons, and all they had to do was maybe sometimes say the right thing, and then bam, I'm off on a tangent. I was very intense. Like, I'd swear a lot, like quite a bit.
I can't imagine that.
Just very rough around the edges guy, and when you get me worked up, I get passionate about something, F-bombs and all that kind of stuff come out. And at the time, Breaking Bad was a show that was very popular. And they got me fired up about something one day. I don't even remember what it was. And I can't remember if it was Danny or Ian or Garth. It had to have been one of them dudes that I was going off on a tangent. We're getting ready to go on the range. They're like, you need to calm down, Jesse Pinkman. Like, just, it's not even like, calm down. And at first I was like, what the fuck, bro? Like, it upset me, but then I was like, yeah, you're right. That's whatever. I am very, like, tense about something that probably isn't that big a deal right now. Nor did I have any control over it whatsoever. So it stuck. So then I started getting called Pinkman, and I ended up getting, like, name tapes. So every year I get name tapes for the guys for, like, a Christmas thing. So we went from, like, black plate carriers to green plate carriers, got everyone new name tapes. So I just replaced mine on my helmet, said Pinkman, on my plate carrier said Pinkman.
Yeah.
And it just kind of stuck. And then my Instagram handle was like, oh, Pinkman in 83. That's how that came about. So yeah, my name's not actually Pinkman.
Yeah. I think I'll throw a lot of people for a loop.
Yeah.
They're like, wait a second.
That's too funny. Well, Steve, thank you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you guys very much. This has been a lot of fun, especially now getting to do this with you guys, and it feels way more relaxed of a conversation. I don't feel so like clenched.
You got me on that one.
But I appreciate it very much that you guys inviting me to be a part of not just doing the podcast, but just being a part of what you guys are doing now. And I'm excited to see what you guys, have coming in the future and what you guys accomplish.
Yeah, man.
We're just
Just
trying
barely
to do good things with good people.
Yeah.
So
Amen.
yeah, thanks for coming, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for being candid and opening up, and yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.